Excellent, Mr. Sabin said. Now listen, Emile. It has pleased me chiefly, as you know, for the sake of your wife, the good Annette, to be very merciful to you as regards the past. But I do not propose to allow you to run a poison bureau for the advantage of the Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer and his friends, more especially, perhaps, as I am at present upon his list of superfluous persons. The man trembled. Monsieur, he said, the prince knows as much as you know, and he has not the mercy that one shows to a dog. You will find, Mr. Sabin said, that if you do not obey me, I myself can develop a similar disposition. Now answer me this. You have within the last few days supplied several people with that marvelous powder for the preparation of which you are so justly famed. Several? No, monsieur. 2 only. Their names. The man trembled. If they should know. They will not, Emile. I will see to that. The first I supplied to the order of the prince. Good. And the second? To a lady whose name I do not know. Mr. Sabin raised his eyebrows. Is not that, he remarked, a little irregular? The lady wrote her request before me in the yellow crayon. It was sufficient. And you do not know her name, Emile? No, monsieur. She was dark and tall, and closely veiled. She was here but a few minutes since. Dark and tall, Mr. Sabin repeated to himself thoughtfully. Emile, you are telling me the truth. I do not dare to tell you anything else, monsieur, the man answered. Mr. Sabin did not continue his interrogations for a few moments. Suddenly he looked up. Has that lady left the place yet, Emile? No, monsieur. Mr. Sabin smiled. Have you a back exit? He asked. None that the lady would know of, Emile answered. She must pass along the passage which borders this apartment, and enter the bar by a door from behind. If monsieur desires it, it is impossible for her to leave unobserved. That is excellent, Emile, Mr. Sabin said. Now there is one more question, quite a harmless one. Annette spoke of my life being in some way insured. It is true, monsieur, Emile admitted. A lady who also possessed the yellow crayon came here the day that monsieur incurred the displeasure of his friends. She tried to bribe me to blow up my laboratory and leave the country, or that I should substitute a harmless powder for any required by the prince. I was obliged to refuse. And then she promised me a large sum if you were alive in 6 months, and made me at once a payment. Dear me, Mr. Sabin said, this is quite extraordinary. I can tell monsieur the lady's name, Emile continued, for she raised her veil, and everywhere the illustrated papers have been full of her picture. It was the lady who was besieged in a little town of South Africa, and who carried dispatches for the general, disguised as a man. Lady Carey, Mr. Sabin remarked quietly. That was the lady's name, Emile agreed. Mr. Sabin was thoughtful for a few moments. Then he looked up. Emile Saxe, he said sternly, you have given out at least one portion of your abominable concoction which is meant to end my days. Whether I shall escape it or not remains to be seen. I am forced at the best to discharge my servant, and to live the life of a hunted man. Now you have done enough mischief in the world. Tomorrow morning a messenger will place in your hands £200. A larger sum will await you at Baring's Bank in New York. You will go there and buy a small restaurant in the business quarter. This is your last chance, Emile. I give it to you for the sake of Annette. And I accept it, monsieur, with gratitude. For the present. Mr. Sabin stopped short. His quick ears had caught the swish of woman's gown passing along the passage outside. Emile too had heard it. It is the dark lady, he whispered, who purchased from me the other powder. See, I open gently this door. Monsieur must both see and hear. The door at the end of the passage was opened. A woman stepped out into the little bar and made her way towards the door. Here she was met by a man entering. Mr. Sabin held up his forefinger to stop the terrified exclamation which trembled on Emile's lips. The woman was Lucille, the man the prince. It was Lucille who was speaking. You have followed me, prince. It is intolerable. Dear Lucille, it is for your own sake. These are not fit parts for you to visit alone. It is my own business, she answered coldly. The prince appeared to be in a complaisant mood. Come, he said, the affair is not worth a quarrel. I ask you no questions. Only since we are here I propose that we test the cooking of the good Annette. We will lunch together. What, here? She answered. Absurd. By no means, he answered. As you doubtless know, the exterior of the place is entirely misleading. These people are old servants of mine. I can answer for the luncheon. You can also eat it, came the prompt reply. I am returning to the carriage. But Mr. Sabin emerged through the swing door. "Your discretion, my dear Lucille," he said, smiling, "is excellent. The place is indeed better than it seems, and Annette's cookery may be all that the prince claims. Yet I think I know better places for a luncheon party, and the ventilation is not of the best. May I suggest that you come with me instead to the Milan? Victor, you hear?" Mr. Sabin smiled as he admitted the obvious fact. The prince's face was as black as night. "Believe me," Mr. Sabin said, turning to the prince, "I sympathize entirely with your feelings at the present moment. I myself have suffered in precisely the same manner. The fact is, intrigue in this country is almost an impossibility. At Paris, Vienna, Pest, how different. You raise your little finger, and the deed is done. Superfluous people, like myself, are removed like the hairs from your chin. But here intrigue seems indeed to exist only within the pages of a shilling novel, or in a comic opera. The gentleman with a helmet there, who regards us so benignly, will presently earn a shilling by calling me a handsome. Yet in effect he does me a far greater service. He stands for a multitude of cold Anglo-Saxon laws, adamant, incorruptible, inflexible, as certain as the laws of nature herself. I am quite aware that by this time I ought to be lying in a dark cellar with a gag in my mouth, or perhaps in the river with a dagger in my chest. But here in England, no." The prince smiled, to all appearance a very genial smile. "You are right, my dear friend," he said, "yet what you say possesses, shall we call it, a somewhat antediluvian flavor. Intrigue is no longer a clumsy game of knife and string and bowl. It becomes today a game of finesse. I can assure you that I have no desire to give a stage whistle and have you throttled at my feet. On the contrary, I beg you to use my carriage, which you will find in the street. You will lunch at the Milan with Lucille. And I shall retire discomfited to eat alone at my club. But the game is a long one, my dear friend. The new methods take time. This conversation," Mr. Sabin said to Lucille, "is interesting, but it is a little ungallant. I think that we will resume it at some future occasion. Shall we accept the prince's offer, or shall we be truly democratic and take a hansom?" Lucille passed her arm through his and laughed. "You are robbing the prince of me," she declared. "Let us leave him his carriage." She nodded her farewells to Saxe-Leinitzer, who took leave of them with a low bow. As they waited at the corner for a hansom, Mr. Sabin glanced back. The prince had disappeared through the swing doors. "I want you to promise me one thing," Lucille said earnestly. "It is promised," Mr. Sabin answered. "You will not ask me the reason of my visit to this place." "I have no curiosity," Mr. Sabin answered. "Come." Chapter 28. Mr. Sabin, contrary to his usual custom, engaged a private room at the Milan. Lucille was in the highest spirits. "If only this were a game instead of reality," she said, flashing a brilliant smile at him across the table, "I should find it most fascinating. You seem to come to me always when I want you most. And do you know, it is perfectly charming to be carried off by you in this manner." Mr. Sabin smiled at her, and there was a look in his eyes which shone there for no other woman. "It is in effect," he said, "keeping me young. Events seem to have enclosed us in a curious little cobweb. All the time we are struggling between the rankest primitivism and the most delicate intrigue. Today is the triumph of primitivism. Meaning that you, the medieval knight, have carried me off, the distressed maiden, on your shoulder. Having confounded my enemy," he continued, smiling, "by an embarrassing situation, a little argument, and the distant view of a policeman's helmet. This," she remarked, with a little satisfied sigh as she selected an ortolan, "is a very satisfactory place to be carried off to. And you," she added, leaning across the table and touching his fingers for a moment tenderly, "are a very delightful knight-errant." He raised the fingers to his lips. The waiter had left the room. She blushed, but yielded her hand readily enough. "Victor," she murmured, "you would spoil the most faithless woman on earth for all her lovers. You make me very impatient." "Impatience, then," he declared, "must be the most infectious of fevers. For I too am a terrible sufferer. If only the prince," she said, "would be reasonable." "I am afraid," Mr. Sabin answered, "that from him we have not much to hope for. Yet," she continued, "I have fulfilled all the conditions. Reginald Brott remains the enemy of our cause and order. Yet some say that his influence upon the people is lessened. In any case, my work is over. He began to mistrust me long ago. Today I believe that mistrust is the only feeling he has in connection with me. I shall demand my release." "I am afraid," Mr. Sabin said, "that Saxe-Leinitzer has other reasons for keeping you at Dorset House." She shrugged her shoulders. He has been very persistent even before I left Vienna. But he must know that it is hopeless. I have never encouraged him. I am sure of it, Mr. Sabin said. It is the incorrigible vanity of the man which will not be denied. He has been taught to believe himself irresistible. I have never doubted you for a single moment, Lucille. I could not. But you have been the slave of these people long enough. As you say, your task is over. Its failure was always certain. Rod believes in his destiny, and it will be no slight thing which will keep him from following it. They must give you back to me. We will go back to America, she said. I have never been so happy as at Lenox. Nor I, Mr. Sahan said softly. Besides, she continued, the times have changed since I joined the society. In Hungary you know how things were. The socialists were carrying all before them, a united solid body. The aristocracy were forced to enter into some sort of combination against them. We saved Austria, I am not sure that we did not save Russia. But England is different. The aristocracy here are a strong resident class. They have their House of Lords, they own the land, and will own it for many years to come. Their position is unassailable. It is the worst country in Europe for us to work in. The very climate and the dispositions of the people are inimical to intrigue. It is Muriel Carey who brought the society here. It was a mistake. The country is in no need of it. There is no scope for it. If only one could get beyond Saxe-Leinitzer, Mr. Sabin said. She shook her head. Behind him, she said, there is only the one to whom all reference is forbidden. And there is no man in the world who would be less likely to listen to an appeal from you, or from me. After all, Mr. Sabin said, though Saxe-Leinitzer is our enemy, I am not sure that he can do us any harm. If he declines to release you, well, when the 12 months are up you are free whether he wishes it or not. He has put me outside the pale. But this is not, or never was, a vindictive society. They do not deal in assassinations. In this country at least anything of the sort is rarely attempted. If I were a young man with my life to live in the capitals of Europe I should be more or less a social outcast, I suppose. But I am proof against that sort of thing. Lucille looked a little doubtful. The prince, she said, is an intriguer of the old school. I know that in Vienna he has more than once made use of more violent means than he would dare to do here. And there is an underneath machinery very seldom used, I believe, and of which none of us who are ordinary members know anything at all, which gives him terrible powers. Mr. Sabin nodded grimly. It was worked against me in America, he said, but I got the best of it. Here in England I do not believe that he would dare to use it. If so, I think that before now it would have been aimed at Brott. I have just read his Glasgow speech. If he becomes premier it will lead to something like a revolution. She sighed. Brott is a clever man, and a strong man, she said. I am sorry for him, but I do not believe that he will never become Prime Minister of England. Mr. Sabin sipped his wine thoughtfully. I believe, he said, that intrigue is the resource of those who have lived their lives so quickly that they have found weariness. For these things today interest me very little. I am only anxious to have you back again, Lucille, to find ourselves on our way to our old home. She laughed softly. And I used to think, she said, that after all I could only keep you a little time, that presently the voices from the outside world would come whispering in your ears, and you would steal back again to where the wheels of life were turning. A man, he answered, is not easily whispered out of paradise. She laughed at him. Ah, it is so easy, she said, to know that your youth was spent at a court. There is only one court, he answered, where men learn to speak the truth. She leaned back in her chair. Oh, you are incorrigible, she said softly. The one role in life in which I fancied you ill at ease you seem to fill to perfection. And that, you are an adorable husband. I should like, he said, a better opportunity to prove it. Let us hope, she murmured, that our separation is nearly over. I shall appeal to the prince tonight. My remaining at Dorset House is no longer necessary. I shall come, he said, and demand you in person. She shook her head. No, they would not let you in, and it would make it more difficult. Be patient a little longer. He came and sat by her side. She leaned over to meet his embrace. You make patience, he murmured, a torture. Mr. Sabin walked home to his rooms late in the afternoon, well content on the whole with his day. He was in no manner prepared for the shock which greeted him on entering his sitting room. Deussen was leaning back in his most comfortable easy chair. Deussen, Mr. Sabin said sharply. What does this mean? There was no answer. Mr. Sabin moved quickly forward, and then stopped short. He had seen dead men, and he knew the signs. Doosan was stone dead. Mr. Sabin's nerve answered to this demand upon it. He checked his first impulse to ring the bell, and looked carefully on the table for some note or message from the dead man. He found it almost at once, a large envelope. In Doosan's handwriting. Mr. Sabin hastily broke the seal and read, "Monsieur, I kill myself because it is easiest and best. The poison was given me for you, but I have not the courage to become a murderer, or afterwards to conceal my guilt. Monsieur has been a good master to me, and also Madame la Comtesse was always indulgent and kind. The mistake of my life has been the joining the lower order of the society. The money which I have received has been but a poor return for the anxiety and trouble which have come upon me since Madame la Comtesse left America. Now that I seek shelter in the grave, I am free to warn Monsieur that the Prince of SL is his determined and merciless enemy, and that he has already made an unlawful use of his position in the society for the sake of private vengeance. If Monsieur would make a powerful friend, he should seek the Lady Muriel Carey. Monsieur will be so good as to destroy this when read. My will is in my trunk. Your Grace's faithful servant, Jules Doosan." Mr. Sabin read this letter carefully through to the end. Then he put it into his pocketbook and quickly rang the bell. "You had better send for a doctor at once," he said to the waiter who appeared. "My servant appears to have suffered from some sudden illness. I am afraid that he is quite dead." Chapter 29. "You spoke, my dear Lucille," the Duchess of Dorset said, "of your departure. Is not that a little premature?" Lucille shrugged her beautiful shoulders, and leaned back in her corner of the couch with half-closed eyes. The Duchess, who was very Anglo-Saxon, was an easy person to read, and Lucille was anxious to know her fate. "Why premature?" she asked. "I was sent for to use my influence with Reginald Brott. Well, I did my best, and I believe that for days it was just a chance whether I did not succeed. However, as it happened, I failed. One of his friends came and pulled him away just as he was wavering. He has declared himself now once and for all. After his speech at Glasgow he cannot draw back. I was brought all the way from America, and I want to go back to my husband." The Duchess pursed her lips. "When one has the honor, my dear," she said, "of belonging to so wonderful an organization as this, we must not consider too closely the selfish claims of family. I am sure that years ago I should have laughed at anyone who had told me that I, Georgina Croxton, should ever belong to such a thing as a secret society, even though it had some connection with so harmless and excellent an organization as the Primrose League." "It does seem remarkable," Lucille murmured. "But look what terrible times have come upon us," the Duchess continued, without heeding the interruption. "When I was a girl a radical was a person absolutely without consideration. Now all our great cities are hotbeds of socialism and anarchism. The whole country seems banded together against the aristocracy and the landowners. Combination amongst us became absolutely necessary in some shape or form. When the prince came and began to drop hints about the way the spread of socialism had been checked in Hungary and Austria, and even Germany, I was interested from the first. And when he went further, and spoke of the society, it was I who persuaded Dorset to join. Dear man, he is very earnest, but very slow, and very averse to anything at all secretive. I am sure the reflection that he is a member of a secret society, even although it is simply a linking together of the aristocracy of Europe in their own defense, has kept him awake for many a night." Lucille was a little bored. "The society," she said, "is an admirable one enough, but just now I am beginning to feel it a little exacting. I think that the prince expects a good deal of one. I shall certainly ask for my release tonight." The Duchess looked doubtful. "Release," she repeated. "Come, is that not rather an exaggerated expression? I trust that your stay at Dorset House has not in any way suggested an imprisonment." "On the contrary," Lucille answered, "you and the Duke have been most kind. But you must remember that I have home of my own, and a husband of my own." "I have no doubt," the Duchess said, "that you will be able to return to them some day. But you must not be impatient. I do not think that the prince has given up all hopes of Reginald Brott yet." Lucille was silent. So her emancipation was to be postponed. After all, it was what she had feared. She sat watching idly the Duchess's knitting needles. Lady Carey came sweeping in, wonderful in a black velvet gown and a display of jewels almost barbaric. "On my way to the opera," she announced. "The Madisons sent me their box. Will any of you good people come? What do you say, Lucille?" Lucille shook her head. "My toilette is deficient," she said, "and besides, I am staying at home to see the prince. We expect him this evening." You'll probably be disappointed then, Lady Carey remarked, for he's going to join us at the opera. Run and change your gown. I'll wait. Are you sure that the prince will be there? Lucille asked. Certain. Then I will come, she said, if the Duchess will excuse me. The Duchess and Lady Carey were left alone for a few minutes. The former put down her knitting. Why do we keep that woman here, she asked, now that Brot has broken away from her altogether. Lady Carey laughed meaningly. Better ask the prince, she remarked. The Duchess frowned. My dear Muriel, she said, I think that you are wrong to make such insinuations. I am sure that the prince is too much devoted to our cause to allow any personal considerations to intervene. Lady Carey yawned. Rats, she exclaimed. The Duchess took up her knitting, and went on with it without remark. Lady Carey burst out laughing. Don't look so shocked, she exclaimed. It's funny. I can't help being a bit slangy. You do take everything so seriously. Of course you can see that the prince is waiting to make a fool of himself over Lucille. He has been trying more or less all his life. He may admire her, the Duchess said. I am sure that he would not allow that to influence him in his present position. By the by, she is anxious to leave us now that the Brot affair is over. Do you think that the prince will agree? Lady Carey's face hardened. I am sure that he will not, she said coolly. There are reasons why she may not at present be allowed to rejoin her husband. The Duchess used her needles briskly. For my part, she said, I can see no object in keeping her here any longer. Mr. Brot has shown himself quite capable of keeping her at arm's length. I cannot see what further use she is. Lady Carey heard the flutter of skirts outside and rose. There are wheels within wheels, she remarked. My dear Lucille, what a charming toilette. We shall have the lady journalists besieging us in our box. Paquin, of course. Good night, Duchess. Glad to see you're getting on with the socks, or stockings, do you call them? Insolent aristocratic, now and then attractive in some strange suggestive way, Lady Carey sat in front of the box and exchanged greetings with her friends. Presently the prince came in and took the chair between the two women. Lady Carey greeted him with a nod. Here's Lucille dying to return to her lawful husband, she remarked. Odd thing, isn't it? Most of the married women I ever knew are dying to get away from theirs. You can make her happy or miserable in a few moments. The prince leaned over between them, but he looked only at Lucille. I wish that I could, he murmured. I wish that that were within my power. It is, she answered coolly. Muriel is quite right. I am most anxious to return to my husband. The prince said nothing. Lady Carey, glancing towards him at that moment, was surprised at certain signs of disquietude in his face which startled her. What is the matter with you? She asked almost roughly. Matter with me? Nothing, he answered. Why this unaccustomed solicitude? Lady Carey looked into his face fiercely. He was pale, and there was a strained look about his eyes. He seemed, too, to be listening. From outside in the street came faintly to their ears the cry of a newsboy. Get me an evening paper, she whispered in his ear. He got up and left the box. Lucille was watching the people below and had not appreciated the significance of what had been passing between the two. Lady Carey leaned back in the box with half-closed eyes. Her fingers were clenched nervously together, her bosom was rising and falling quickly. If he had dared to defy her. What was it the newsboys were calling? What a jargon! Why did not Saxe Leinitzer return? Perhaps he was afraid. Her heart stood still for a moment, and a little half-stifled cry broke from her lips. Lucille looked around quickly. What is the matter, Muriel? She asked. Are you faint? Faint? No, Lady Carey answered roughly. I'm quite well. Don't take any notice of me. Do you hear? Don't look at me. Lucille obeyed. Lady Carey sat quite still with her hand pressed to her side. It was a stifling pain. She was sure that she had heard at last. Sudden death of a visitor at the Carlton Hotel. The place was beginning to go round. Saxe Leinitzer returned. His face to her seemed positively ghastly. He carried an evening paper in his hand. She snatched it away from him. It was there before her in bold, black letters. Sudden death in the Carlton Hotel. Her eyes, dim a moment ago, suddenly blazed fire upon him. It shall be a life for a life, she whispered. If you have killed him you shall die. Lucille looked at him bewildered. And just then came a sharp tap at the box door. No one answered it, but the door was softly opened. Mr. Sabin stood upon the threshold. Pray, don't let me disturb you, he said. I was unable to refrain from paying you a brief visit. Why, Prince, Lady Carey. I can assure you that I am no ghost. He glanced from one to the other with a delicate smile of mockery parting his thin lips. For upon the prince's forehead the perspiration stood out like beads, and he shrank away from Mr. Sabin as from some unholy thing. Lady Carey had fallen back across her chair. Her hand was still pressed to her side, and her face was very pale. A nervous little laugh broke from her lips. Chapter 30. Mr. Sabin found a fourth chair, and calmly seated himself by Lucille's side. But his eyes were fixed upon Lady Carey. She was slowly recovering herself, but Mr. Sabin, who had never properly understood her attitude towards him, was puzzled at the air of intense relief which almost shone in her face. "You seem, all of you," he remarked suavely, "to have found the music a little exciting." Wagner certainly knew how to find his way to the emotions. Or perhaps I interrupted an interesting discussion. Lucille smiled gently upon him. "These two," she said, looking from the prince to Lady Carey, "seem to have been afflicted with a sudden nervous excitement, and yet I do not think that they are, either of them, very susceptible to music." Lady Carey leaned forward, and looked at him from behind the large fan of white feathers which she was lazily fluttering before her face. "Your entrance," she murmured, "was most opportune, besides being very welcome. The prince and I were literally on the point of flying at one another's throats." Mr. Sabin glanced at his neighbor and smiled. "You are certainly a little out of sorts, Saxe Leinitzer," he remarked. "You look pale, and your hands are not quite steady. Nerves, I suppose. You should see Dr. Carson in Brook Street." The prince shrugged his shoulders. "My health," he said, "was never better. It is true that your coming was somewhat of a surprise," he added, looking steadily at Mr. Sabin. "I understood that you had gone for a short journey, and I was not expecting to see you back again so soon." "Deussen," Mr. Sabin said, "has taken that short journey instead. It was rather a liberty, but he left a letter for me fully explaining his motives. I cannot blame him." The prince stroked his moustache. "Ah," he remarked, "that is a pity. You may, however, find it politic, even necessary, to join him very shortly." Mr. Sabin smiled grimly. "I shall go when I am ready," he said, "not before." Lucille looked from one to the other with protesting eyebrows. "Come," she said, "it is very impolite of you to talk in riddles before my face. I have been flattering myself, Victor, that you were here to see me. Do not wound my vanity." He whispered something in her ear, and she laughed softly back at him. The prince, with the evening paper in his hand, escaped from the box, and found a retired spot where he could read the little paragraph at his leisure. Lady Carey pretended to be absorbed by the music. "Has anything happened, Victor?" Lucille whispered. He hesitated. "Well, in a sense, yes," he admitted. "I appear to have become unpopular with our friend, the prince. Deussen, who has always been a spy upon my movements, was entrusted with a little sleeping draught for me, which he preferred to take himself. That is all. Deussen is," he nodded. "He is dead." Lucille went very pale. "This is horrible," she murmured. "The prince is a little annoyed, naturally," Mr. Sabin said. "It is vexing to have your plans upset in such a manner." She shuddered. "He is hateful, Victor. I fear that he does not mean to let me leave Dorset House just yet. I am almost inclined to become, like you, an outcast. Who knows, we might go free. Bloodshed is always avoided as much as possible, and I do not see how else they could strike at me. Social ostracism is their chief weapon. But in America that could not hurt us." He shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "I am sure that Saxe Leinitzer is not playing the game. But he is too well served here to make defiance wise." "You run the risk yourself," she protested. He smiled. "It is a different matter. By the by, we are overheard." Lady Carey had forgotten to listen any more to the music. She was watching them both, a steely light in her eyes, her fingers nervously entwined. The prince was still absent. "Pray do not consider me," she begged. "So far as I am concerned, your conversation is of no possible interest. But I think you had better remember that the prince is in the corridor just outside." "We are much obliged to you," Mr. Sabin said. "The prince may hear every word I have to say about him. But all the same, I thank you for your warning." "I fear that we are very unsociable, Muriel," Lucille said, "and, after all, I should never have been here but for you." Lady Carey turned her left shoulder upon them. "I beg," she said, "that you will leave me alone with the music. I prefer it." The prince suddenly stood upon the threshold. His hand rested lightly upon the arm of another man. Come in, Brot, he said. The women will be charmed to see you. And I don't suppose they've read your speeches. Countess, here is the man who counts all equal under the sun, who decries class, and recognizes no social distinctions. Brot was born to lead a revolution. He is our natural enemy. Let us all try to convert him. Brot was pale, and deep new lines were furrowed on his face. Nevertheless he smiled faintly as he bowed over Lucille's fingers. My introduction, he remarked, is scarcely reassuring. Yet here at least, if anywhere in the world, we should all meet upon equal ground. Music is a universal leveler. And we haven't a chance, Lady Carey remarked with uplifted eyebrows, of listening to a bar of it. Lucille welcomed the newcomer coldly. Nevertheless, he maneuvered himself into the place by her side. She took up her fan and commenced swinging it thoughtfully. You are surprised to see me here? He murmured. Yes, she admitted. He looked wearily away from the stage up into her face. And I too, he said. I am surprised to find myself here. I pictured you, she remarked, as immersed in affairs. Did I not hear something of a radical ministry with you for premier? It has been spoken of, he admitted. Then I really cannot see, she said, what you are doing here. Why not? He asked doggedly. She shrugged her shoulders. In the first place, she said, you ought to be rushing about amongst your supporters, keeping 'em up to the mark, and all that sort of thing. And in the second, well, are we not the very people against whom you have declared war? I have declared war against no people, he answered. It is systems and classes, abuses, injustice against which I have been forced to speak. I would not deprive your order of a single privilege to which they are justly entitled. But you must remember that I am a people's man. Their cause is mine. They look to me as their mouthpiece. Lucille shrugged her shoulders. You cannot evade the point, she said. If you are the, what do you call it, the mouthpiece of the people, I do not see how you can be anything else than the enemy of the aristocracy. The aristocracy, who are they? He asked. I am the enemy of all those who, because they possess an ancient name and inherited wealth, consider themselves the God-appointed bullies of the poor, dealing them out meager charities, lordly patronage, and unspoken but bitter contempt. But the aristocracy of the earth are not of such as these. Your class are furnishing the world with advanced thinkers every year, every month. Inherited prejudices can never survive the next few generations. The fusion of classes must come. She shook her head. You are sanguine, my friend, she said. Many generations have come and gone since the wonderful pages of history were opened to us. And during all these years how much nearer have the serf and the aristocrat come together? Nay, have they not rather drifted apart? But listen, this is the great chorus. We must not miss it. So the prince has brought back the wanderer, Lady Carey whispered to Mr. Sabin behind her fan. Hasn't he rather the air of a sheep who has strayed from the fold? Mr. Sabin raised the horn eyeglass, which he so seldom used, and contemplated Brot steadily. He reminds me more than ever, he remarked, of Renzi. He is like a man torn asunder by great causes. They say that his speech at Glasgow was the triumph of a born orator. Lady Carey shrugged her shoulders. It was practically the preaching a revolution to the people, she said. A few more such, and we might have the red flag waving. He left Glasgow in a ferment. If he really comes into power, what are we to expect? To the onlookers, Mr. Sabin remarked, a revolution in this country would possess many interesting features. The common people lack the ferocity of our own rabble, but they are even more determined. I may yet live to see an English duke earning an honest living in the States. It depends very much upon Brot, Lady Carey said. For his own sake it is a pity that he is in love with Lucille. Mr. Sabin agreed with her blandly. It is, he affirmed, a most regrettable incident. She leaned a little towards him. The box was not a large one, and their chairs already touched. Are you a jealous husband? She asked. Horribly, he answered. Your devotion to Lucille, or rather the singleness of your devotion to Lucille, she remarked, is positively the most gauche thing about you. It is, absolutely callow. He laughed gently. Did I not always tell you, he said, that when I did marry I should make an excellent husband? You were at least, she answered sharply, a very complaisant one. The prince leaned forward from the shadows of the box. I invite you all, he said, to supper with me. It is something of an occasion, this. For I do not think that we shall all meet again just as we are now for a very long time. Your invitation, Mr. Sabin remarked, is most agreeable. But your suggestion is, to say the least of it, nebulous. I do not see what is to prevent your all having supper with me tomorrow evening. Lady Carey laughed as she rose, and stretched out her hand for her cloak. Tomorrow evening, she said, is a long way off. Let us make sure of tonight, before the prince changes his mind. Mr. Sabin bowed low. Tonight by all means, he declared. But my invitation remains, a challenge. Chapter 31. The prince, being host, arranged the places at his supper table. Mr. Sabin found himself, therefore, between Lady Carey and a young German attaché, whom they had met in the anteroom of the restaurant. Lucille had the prince and Mr. Brott on either side of her. Lady Carey monopolized at first the greater part of the conversation. Mr. Sabin was unusually silent. The German attaché, whose name was Baron von Opperman, did not speak until the champagne was served, when he threw a bombshell into the midst of the little party. I hear, he said, with a broad and seraphic smile, that in this hotel there has today a murder been committed. Baron von Opperman was suddenly the cynosure of several pairs of eyes. He was delighted with the success of his attempt towards the general entertainment. The evening papers, he continued, they have in them news of a sudden death. But in the hotel here now they are speaking of something, what you call more mysterious. There has been ordered an examination post-mortem. It is a case of poisoning then, I presume? The prince asked, leaning forward. It is so supposed, the attaché answered. It seems that the doctors could find no trace of disease, nothing to have caused death. They were not able to decide anything. The man, they said, was in perfect health, but dead. It must have been, then, the prince remarked, a very wonderful poison. Without doubt, Baron Opperman answered. The prince sighed gently. There are many such, he murmured. Indeed the science of toxicology was never so ill understood as now. I am assured that there are many poisons known only to a few chemists in the world, a single grain of which is sufficient to destroy the strongest man and leave not the slightest trace behind. If the poisoner be sufficiently accomplished he can pursue his calling without the faintest risk of detection. Mr. Sabin sipped his wine thoughtfully. The prince is, I believe, right, he remarked. It is for that reason, doubtless, that I have heard of men whose lives have been threatened, who have deposited in safe places a sealed statement of the danger in which they find themselves, with an account of its source, so that if they should come to an end in any way mysterious there may be evidence against their murderers. A very reasonable and judicious precaution, the prince remarked with glittering eyes. Only if the poison was indeed of such a nature that it was not possible to trace it, nothing worse than suspicion could ever be the lot of anyone. Mr. Sabin helped himself carefully to salad, and resumed the discussion with his next course. Perhaps not, he admitted. But you must remember that suspicion is of itself a grievous embarrassment. No man likes to feel that he is being suspected of murder. By the by, is it known whom the unfortunate person was? The servant of a French nobleman who is staying in the hotel, Mr. Brott remarked. I heard as much as that. Mr. Sabin smiled. Lady Carey glanced at him meaningly. You have worried the prince quite sufficiently, she whispered. Change the subject. Mr. Sabin bowed. You are very considerate, to the prince, he said. It is perhaps for your sake, she answered. And as for the prince, well, you know, or you should know, for how much he counts with me. Mr. Sabin glanced at her curiously. She was a little flushed as though with some inward excitement. Her eyes were bright and soft. Despite a certain angularity of figure and her hollow cheeks she was certainly one of the most distinguished-looking women in the room. You are so dense, she whispered in his ear, willfully dense, perhaps. You will not understand that I wish to be your friend. He smiled with gentle deprecation. Do you blame me, he murmured, if I seem incredulous? For I am an old man, and you are spoken of always as the friend of my enemy, the friend of the prince. I wonder, she said thoughtfully, if this is really the secret of your mistrust. Do you indeed fear that I have no other interest in life save to serve Saxe-Leinitzer? As to that, he answered, I cannot say. Yet I know that only a few months ago you were acting under orders from him. It is you who brought Lucille from America. It was through you that the first blow was struck at my happiness. Cannot I atone? She murmured under her breath. If I can I will. And as for the present, well, I am outside his schemes now. Let us be friends. You would find me a very valuable ally. Let it be so, he answered without emotion. You shall help me, if you will, to regain Lucille. I promise you then that my gratitude shall not disappoint you. She bit her lip. And are you sure, she whispered, that Lucille is anxious to be won back? She loves intrigue, excitement, the sense of being concerned in important doings. Besides, you must have heard what they say about her, and Brot. Look at her now. She wears her grass widowhood lightly enough. Mr. Sabin looked across the table. Lucille had indeed all the appearance of a woman thoroughly at peace with the world and herself. Brot was talking to her in smothered and eager undertones. The prince was waiting for an opportunity to intervene. Mr. Sabin looked into Brot's white strong face, and was thoughtful. It is a great power, the power of my sex, Lady Carey continued, with a faint, subtle smile. A word from Lucille, and the history book of the future must be differently written. She will not speak that word, Mr. Sabin said. Lady Carey shrugged her shoulders. The subtlety of her smile faded away. Her whole face expressed a contemptuous and self-assured cynicism. You know her very well, she murmured. Yet she and I are no strangers. She is one who loves to taste, no, to drink deeply of all the experiences of life. Why should we blame her, you and I? Have we not the same desire? Mr. Sabin lit a cigarette. Once, perhaps, he remarked. You must not forget that I am no longer a young man. She leaned towards him. You will die young, she murmured. You are not of the breed of men who grow old. Do you mean to turn my head? He asked her, with a humorous smile. It would be easier, she answered, than to touch your heart. Then Lucille looked across at him, and Mr. Sabin suddenly remembered that Reginald Brot knew them both only as strangers. Muriel, she said, you are behaving disgracefully. I am doing my best, Lady Carey answered, to keep you in countenance. The eyes of the two women met for a moment, and though the smiles lingered still upon their faces, Lady Carey at any rate was not able to wholly conceal her hatred. Lucille shrugged her shoulders. I am doing my best, she said, to convert Mr. Brot. To what? Lady Carey asked. To a sane point of view concerning the holiness of the aristocracy, Lucille answered. I am afraid though that I have made very little impression. In his heart I believe Mr. Brot would like to see us all working for our living, school teachers and dressmakers, and that sort of thing, you know. Mr. Brot protested. I am not even, he declared, moderately advanced in my views as regards matters of your sex. To tell you the truth, I do not like women to work at all outside their homes. Lady Carey laughed. My dear, she said to Lucille, you and I may as well retire in despair. Can't you see the sort of woman Mr. Brot admires? She isn't like us a bit. She is probably a healthy, ruddy-cheeked young person who lives in the country, gets up to breakfast to pour out the coffee for some sort of a male relative, goes round the garden snipping off roses in big gloves and a huge basket, interviews the cook, orders the dinner, makes fancy waistcoats for her husband, and failing a sewing maid, does the mending for the family. You and I, Lucille, are not like that. Well, you have mentioned nothing which I couldn't do, if it seemed worthwhile, Lucille objected. It sounds very primitive and delightful. I am sure we are all too luxurious and too lazy. I think we ought to turn over a new leaf. For you, dear Lucille, Lady Carey said with suave and deadly satire, what improvement is possible? You have all that you could desire. It is much less fortunate persons, such as myself, to whom Utopia must seem such a delightful place. A frock-coated and altogether immaculate young man approached their table and accosted Mr. Sabin. I beg your pardon, sir, he said, but the manager would be much obliged if you would spare him a moment or two in his private room as soon as possible. Mr. Sabin nodded. In a few minutes, he answered. The little party broke up almost immediately. Coffee was ordered in the palm court, where the band was playing. Mr. Sabin and the prince fell a little behind the others on the way out of the room. You heard my summons? Mr. Sabin asked. Yes. I am going to be cross-examined as regards Dusen. I am no longer a member of the order. What is to prevent my setting them upon the right track? The fact, the prince said coolly, that you are hoping one day to recover Lucille. I doubt, Mr. Sabin said, whether you are strong enough to keep her from me. The prince smiled. All his white teeth were showing. Come, he said, you know better than, much better than that. Lucille must wait her release. You know that. I will buy it, Mr. Sabin said, with a lie to the manager here, or I will tell the truth and still take her from you. The prince stood upon the topmost step of the balcony. Below was the palm court, with many little groups of people dotted about. My dear friend, he said, Dusen died absolutely of his own free will. You know that quite well. We should have preferred that the matter had been otherwise arranged. But as it is we are safe, absolutely safe. Dusen's letter, Mr. Sabin remarked. You will not show it, the prince answered. You cannot. You have kept it too long. And, after all, you cannot escape from the main fact. Dusan committed suicide. He was incited to murder. His letter proves it. The prince shrugged his shoulders. By whom? Ah, how your story would excite ridicule. I seem to hear the laughter now. No, my dear Souspenia, you would bargain for me with Lucille. Look below. Are we likely to part with her just yet? In a corner, behind a gigantic palm, Lucille and Brot were talking together. Lady Carey had drawn Opperman a little distance away. Brot was talking eagerly, his cheeks flushed, his manner earnest. Mr. Sabin turned upon his heel and walked away. Chapter 32. Mr. Sabin, although he had registered at the hotel under his accustomed pseudonym, had taken no pains to conceal his identity, and was well known to the people in authority about the place. He was received with all the respect due to his rank. Your Grace will, I trust, accept my most sincere apologies for disturbing you, Mr. Hertz, the manager, said, rising and bowing at his entrance. We have here, however, an emissary connected with the police come to inquire into the sad incident of this afternoon. He expressed a wish to ask your Grace a question or two with a view to rendering your Grace's attendance at the inquest unnecessary. Mr. Sabin nodded. I am perfectly willing, he said, to answer any questions you may choose to put to me. A plain, hard-featured little man, in a long black overcoat, and holding a bowler hat in his hand, bowed respectfully to Mr. Sabin. I am much obliged to you, sir, he said. My name is John Passmore. We do not of course appear in this matter unless the post-mortem should indicate anything unusual in the circumstances of Dusan's death, but it is always well to be prepared, and I ventured to ask Mr. Hertz here to procure for me your opinion as regards the death of your servant. You have asked me, Mr. Sabin said gravely, a very difficult question. The eyes of the little detective flashed keenly. You do not believe then, sir, that he died a natural death? I do not, Mr. Sabin answered. Mr. Hertz was startled. The detective controlled his features admirably. May I ask your reasons, sir? Mr. Sabin lightly shrugged his shoulders. I have never known the man to have a day's illness in his life, he said. Further, since his arrival in England he has been acting in a strange and furtive manner, and I gathered that he had some cause for fear which he was indisposed to talk about. This, the detective said, is very interesting. Doubtless, Mr. Sabin answered. But before I say anything more I must clearly understand my position. I am giving you personally a few friendly hints, in the interests of justice perhaps, but still quite informally. I am not in possession of any definite facts concerning Dusan, and what I say to you here I am not prepared to say at the inquest, before which I presume I may have to appear as a witness. There, I shall do nothing more save identify Dusan and state the circumstances under which I found him. I understand that perfectly, sir, the man answered. The less said at the inquest the better in the interests of justice. Mr. Sabin nodded. I am glad, he said, that you appreciate that. I do not mind going so far then as to tell you that I believe Dusan died of poison. Can you give me any idea, the detective asked, as to the source? None, Mr. Sabin answered. That you must discover for yourselves. Dusan was a man of silent and secretive habits, and it has occurred to me more than once that he might possibly be a member of one of those foreign societies who have their headquarters in Soho, and concerning which you probably know more than I do. The detective smiled. It was a very slight flicker of the lips, but it attracted Mr. Sabin's keen attention. Your suggestions, the detective said, are making this case a very interesting one. I have always understood, however, that reprisals of this extreme nature are seldom resorted to in this country. Besides, the man's position seems scarcely to indicate sufficient importance, perhaps, well. Mr. Sabin interjected. I notice that Dusan was found in your sitting room. It occurs to me as a possibility that he may have met with a fate intended for someone else, for yourself, for instance, sir. But I, Mr. Sabin said smoothly, am a member of no secret society, nor am I conscious of having enemies sufficiently venomous to desire my life. The detective sat for a moment with a movable face. We, all of us, know our friends, sir, he said. There are few of us properly acquainted with our enemies. Mr. Sabin lit a cigarette. His fingers were quite steady, but this man was making him think. You do not seriously believe, he asked, that Dusan met with a death which was intended for me? I am afraid, the detective said thoughtfully, that I know no more about it than you do. I see, Mr. Sabin said, that I am no stranger to you. You are very far from being that, sir, the man answered. A few years ago I was working for the government, and you were not often out of my sight. Mr. Sabin smiled. It was perhaps judicious, he remarked, though I am afraid it proved of very little profit to you. And what about the present time? I see no harm in telling you, sir, that a general watch is kept upon your movements. Deussen was useful to us. But now Deussen is dead. It is a fact, Mr. Sabin said impressively, that Deussen was a genius. My admiration for him continually increases. Deussen made harmless reports to us as we desired them, the detective said. I have an idea, however, that if this course had at any time been inimical to your interests that Deussen would have deceived us. I am convinced of it, Mr. Sabin declared. And Deussen is dead. Mr. Sabin nodded gravely. The little hard-visaged man looked steadily for a moment upon the carpet. Deussen died virtually whilst accepting pay from, if not actually in the employ of our Secret Service Department. You will understand, therefore, that we, knowing of this complication in his life, naturally incline towards the theory of murder. Shall I be taking a liberty, sir, if I give you an unprofessional word of warning? Mr. Sabin raised his eyebrows. By no means, he answered. But surely you cannot, the man smiled. No, sir, he said dryly. I do not for one moment suspect you. The man was our spy upon your movements, but I am perfectly aware that there has been nothing worth reporting, and I also know that you would never run such a risk for the removal of so insignificant a person. No, my warning comes to you from a different point of view. It is, if you will pardon my saying so, none the less personal, but wholly friendly. The case of Deussen will be sifted to the dregs, but unless I am greatly mistaken, and I do not see room for the possibility of a mistake, I know the truth already. You will share your knowledge? Mr. Sabin asked quietly. The detective shook his head. You shall know, he said, before the last moment. But I want to warn you that when you do know it, it will be a shock to you. Mr. Sabin stood perfectly still for several moments. This little man believed what he was saying. He was certainly deceived. Yet none the less Mr. Sabin was thoughtful. You do not feel inclined, he said slowly, to give me your entire confidence. Not at present, sir, the man answered. You would certainly intervene, and my case would be spoilt. Mr. Sabin glanced at the clock. If you care to call on me tomorrow, he said, I could perhaps show you something which might change your opinion. The detective bowed. I am always open, sir, he said, to conviction. I will come about 12 o'clock. Mr. Sabin went back to the Palm Lounge. Lucille and Reginald Brott were sitting together at a small table, talking earnestly to one another. The Prince and Lady Carey had joined another party who were all talking together near the entrance. The latter, directly she saw them coming, detached herself from him and came to him. Your coffee is almost cold, she said, but the Prince has found some brandy of wonderful age, somewhere in the last century, I believe. Mr. Sabin glanced towards Lucille. She appeared engrossed in her conversation, and had not noticed his approach. Lady Carey shrugged. You have only a few minutes, she said, before that dreadful person comes and frowns us all out. I have kept you a chair. Mr. Sabin sat down. Lady Carey interposed herself between him and the small table at which Lucille was sitting. Have they discovered anything? She asked. Nothing, Mr. Sabin answered. She played with her fan for a moment. Then she looked him steadily in the face. My friend. He glanced towards her. Lady Carey. Why are you so obstinate? She exclaimed in a low, passionate whisper. I want to be your friend, and I could be very useful to you. Yet you keep me always at arm's length. You are making a mistake. Indeed you are. I suppose you do not trust me. Yet reflect. Have I ever told you anything that was not true? Have I ever tried to deceive you? I don't pretend to be a paragon of the virtues. I live my life to please myself. I admit it. Why not? It is simply applying the same sort of philosophy to my life as you have applied to yours. My enemies can find plenty to say about me, but never that I have been false to a friend. Why do you keep me always at arm's length, as though I were one of those who wished you evil? Lady Carey, Mr. Sabin said, I will not affect to misunderstand you, and I am flattered that you should consider my goodwill of any importance. But you are the friend of the Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer. You are one of those even now who are working actively against me. I am not blaming you, but we are on opposite sides. Lady Carey looked for a moment across at the prince, and her eyes were full of venom. If you knew, she murmured, how I loathe that man. Friends, that is all long since past. Nothing would give me so much pleasure as never to see his face again. Nevertheless, Mr. Sabin reminded her, whatever your private feelings may be, he has claims upon you which you cannot resist. There is one thing in the world, she said in a low tone, for which I would risk even the abnegation of those claims. You would perjure your honor. Yes, if it came to that. Mr. Sabin moved uneasily in his chair. The woman was in earnest. She offered him an invaluable alliance, she could show him the way to hold his own against even the inimical combination by which he was surrounded. If only he could compromise. But her eyes were seeking his eagerly, even fiercely. You doubt me still, she whispered. And I thought that you had genius. Listen, I will prove myself. The prince has one of his foolish passions for Lucille. You know that. So far she has shown herself able to resist his fascinations. He is trying other means. Lucille is in danger, Dusan, but after all, I was never really in danger, except the time when I carried the dispatches for the colonel and rode straight into a Boer ambush. Mr. Sabin saw nothing, but he did not move a muscle of his face. A moment later they heard the prince's voice from behind them. I am very sorry, he said, to interrupt these interesting reminiscences, but you see that everyone is going. Lucille is already in the cloakroom. Lady Carey rose at once, but the glance she threw at the prince was a singularly malicious one. They walked down the carpeted way together, and Lady Carey left them without a word. In the vestibule Mr. Sabin and Reginald Brott came face to face. Chapter 33. The greeting between the two men was cold, and the prince almost immediately stepped between them. Nevertheless, Brott seemed to have a fancy to talk with Mr. Sabin. I was at Camperdown House yesterday, he remarked. Her ladyship was regretting that she saw you so seldom. I have been a little remiss, Mr. Sabin answered. I hope to lunch there tomorrow. You have seen the evening paper, Brott? The prince asked. I saw the early editions, Brott answered. Is there anything fresh? The prince dropped his voice a little. He drew Brott on one side. The Westminster declared that you had left for Windsor by an early train this afternoon, and gives a list of your cabinet. The Pall Mall, on the other hand, declares that Letheringham will assuredly be sent for tomorrow. Brott shrugged his shoulders. There are bound to be a crop of such reports at a time like this, he remarked. The prince dropped his voice almost to a whisper. Brott, he said, there is something which I have had it in my mind to say to you for the last few days. I am not perhaps a great politician, but, like many outsiders, I see perhaps a good deal of the game. I know fairly well what the feeling is in Vienna and Berlin. I can give you a word of advice. You are very kind, Prince, Brott remarked, looking uneasily over his shoulder. But it is concerning Brand. There is no man more despised and disliked abroad, not only because he is a Jew and ill-bred, but because of his known sympathy with some of these anarchists who are perfect firebrands in Europe. I am exceedingly obliged to you, Brott answered hurriedly. I am afraid, however, that you anticipate matters a good deal. I have not yet been asked to form a cabinet. It is doubtful whether I ever shall. And, beyond that, it is also doubtful whether even if I am asked I shall accept. I must confess, the prince said, that you puzzle me. Everyone says that the premiership of the country is within your reach. It is surely the mecca of all politicians. There are complications, Brott muttered. You. He stopped short and moved towards the door. Lucille, unusually pale and grave, had just issued from the ladies' ante-room, and joined Lady Carey, who was talking to Mr. Sabin. She touched the latter lightly on the arm. Help us to escape, she said quickly. I am weary of my task. Can we get away without their seeing us? Mr. Sabin offered his arm. They passed along the Broadway, and as they were almost the last to leave the place, their carriage was easily found. The prince and Mr. Brott appeared only in time to see Mr. Sabin turning away, hat in hand, from the curbstone. Brott's face darkened. Prince, he said, who is that man? The prince shrugged his shoulders. A man, he said, who has more than once nearly ruined your country. His life has been a splendid failure. He would have given India to the Russians, but they mistrusted him and trifled away their chance. Once since then he nearly sold this country to Germany, it was a trifle only which intervened. He has been all his life devoted to one cause. And that? Brott asked. The restoration of the monarchy to France. He, as you of course know, is the Duc de Souspenier, the sole living member in the direct line of one of the most ancient and historical houses in England. My friend, he added, turning to Mr. Sabin, you have stolen a march upon us. We had not even an opportunity of making our due to the ladies. I imagine, Mr. Sabin answered, that the cause of quarrel may rest with them. You were nowhere in sight when they came out. These fascinating politics, the prince remarked. We all want to talk politics to Mr. Brott just now. I will wish you good night, gentlemen, Mr. Sabin said, and passed into the hotel. The prince touched Brott on the arm. Will you come round to the club, and take a hand at bridge? He said. Brott laughed shortly. I imagine, he said, that I should be an embarrassing guest to you just now at, say the Marlborough, or even at the St. James. I believe the aristocracy are looking forward to the possibility of my coming into power with something like terror. I am not thoroughly versed in the politics of this country, the prince said, but I have always understood that your views were very much advanced. Dorset solemnly believes that you are pledged to exterminate the large landed proprietors, and I do not think he would be surprised to hear that you had a guillotine up your sleeve. The two men were strolling along pell-mell. The prince had lit a large cigar, and was apparently on the best of terms with himself and the world in general. Brott, on the contrary, was most unlike himself, preoccupied, and apparently ill at ease. The Duke and his class are, of course, my natural opponents, Brott said shortly. By the by, Prince, he added, suddenly turning towards him, and with a complete change of tone, it is within your power to do me a favor. You have only to command, the prince assured him good-naturedly. My rooms are close here, Brott continued. Will you accompany me there, and grant me the favor of a few minutes' conversation? Assuredly, the prince answered, flicking the end off his cigar. It will be a pleasure. They walked on towards their destination in silence. Brott's secretary was in the library with a huge pile of letters and telegrams before him. He welcomed Brott with relief. We have been sending all over London for you, sir, he said. Brott nodded. I am better out of the way for the present, he answered. Deny me to everybody for an hour, especially Letheringham. There is nothing here, I suppose, which cannot wait so long as that. The secretary looked a little doubtful. I think not, sir, he decided. Very good. Go and get something to eat. You look fagged. And tell Hyson to bring up some liqueurs, will you? I shall be engaged for a short time. The secretary withdrew. A servant appeared with a little tray of liqueurs, and in obedience to an impatient gesture from his master, left them upon the table. Brott closed the door firmly. Prince, he said, resuming his seat, I wish to speak with you concerning the Countess. Saxe-Leinitzer nodded. All right, he said. I am listening. I understand, Brott continued, that you are one of her oldest friends, and also one of the trustees of her estates. I presume that you stand to her therefore to some extent in the position of an advisor. It is perfectly true, the prince admitted. I, too, am an old friend, as she has doubtless told you, Brott said. All my life she has been the one woman whom I have desired to call my wife. That desire has never been so strong as at the present moment. The prince removed his cigar from his mouth and looked grave. But, my dear Brott, he said, have you considered the enormous gulf between your views? The Countess owns great hereditary estates, she comes from a family which is almost royal, she herself is an aristocrat to the backbone. It is a class against which you have declared war. How can you possibly come together on common ground? Brott was silent for a moment. Looking at him steadily, the prince was surprised at the change in the man's appearance. His cheeks seemed blanched and his skin drawn. He had lost flesh, his eyes were hollow, and he frequently betrayed in small mannerisms a nervousness wholly new and unfamiliar to him. You speak as a man of sense, Prince, he said after a while. You are absolutely correct. This matter has caused me a great deal of anxious thought. To falter at this moment is to lose, politically, all that I have worked for all my life. It is to lose the confidence of the people who have trusted me. It is a betrayal, the thought of which is a constant shame to me. But, on the other hand, Lucille is the dearest thing to me in life. The prince's expression was wholly sympathetic. The derision which lurked behind he kept wholly concealed. A strong man so abjectly in the toils, and he to be chosen for his confidant. It was melodrama with a dash of humor. If I am to help you, the prince said, I must know everything. Have you made any proposals to Lucille? In plain words, how much of your political future are you disposed to sacrifice? All, Brott said hoarsely. All for a certainty of her. Not one jot without. And she. Brott sprang to his feet, white and nervous. It is where I am at fault, he exclaimed. It is why I have asked for your advice, your help perhaps. I do not find it easy to understand Lucille. Perhaps it is because I am not well versed in the ways of her sex. I find her elusive. She will give me no promise. Before I went to Glasgow I talked with her. If she would have married me then my political career was over, thrown on one side like an old garment. But she would give me no promise. In everything save the spoken words I crave she has promised me her love. Again there comes a climax. In a few hours I must make my final choice. I must decline to join Letheringham, in which case the king must send for me, or accept office with him, and throw away the one great chance of this generation. Letheringham's cabinet, of course, would be a moderate liberal one, a paragon of milk and water ineffectiveness. If I go in alone we make history. The moment of issue has come. And, Prince, although I have pleaded with all the force and all the earnestness I know, Lucille remains elusive. If I choose for her side, she promises me reward. But it is vague to me. I can't understand. I want her for my wife, I want her for the rest of my life, nothing else. Tell me, is there any barrier to this? There are no complications in her life which I do not know of. I want your assurance. I want her promise. You understand me. Yes, I understand you, the prince said gravely. I understand more than you do. I understand Lucille's position. Brot leaned forward with bright eyes. Ah. Lucille, the Countess of Radence, is at the present moment a married woman. Brot was speechless. His face was like a carved stone image, from which the life had wholly gone. Her husband, in name only, let me tell you, is the Mr. Sabin with whom we had supper this evening. Great God! Their marriage had strange features in it which are not my concern, or even yours, the prince said deliberately. The truth is, that they have not lived together for years, they never will again, for their divorce proceedings would long ago have been concluded but for the complications arising from the difference between the Hungarian and the American laws. Here, without doubt, is the reason why the Countess has hesitated to pledge her word directly. It is wonderful, Brot said slowly. But it explains everything. There was a loud knock at the door. The secretary appeared upon the threshold. Behind him was a tall, slim young man in traveling costume. The king's messenger, Brot exclaimed, rising to his feet. Chapter 34. The prince presented himself with a low bow. Lucille had a copy of the morning paper in her hand. I congratulate you, Countess, he said. You progress admirably. It is a great step gained. Lucille, who was looking pale and nervous, regarded him with anxiety. A step. But it is everything. If these rumors are true, he refuses the attempt to form a cabinet. He takes a subordinate position under Letheringham. Every paper this morning says that if this is so his political career is over. It is true, is it not? It is a great gain, the prince said slowly. But it is everything, Lucille declared, with a rising note of passion in her tone. It was my task. It is accomplished. I demand my release. The prince was silent for a moment. You are in a great hurry, Lucille, he said. What if I am? She replied fiercely. Do you suppose that this life of lies and deceit is pleasant to me? Do you suppose that it is a pleasant task to lure a brave man onto his ruin? The prince raised his eyebrows. Come, he said, you can have no sympathy with Reginald Brot, the sworn enemy of our class, a socialist, a demagogue who would parcel out our lands in allotments, a man who has pledged himself to nothing more nor less than a revolution. The man's views are hateful enough, she answered, but he is in earnest, and however misguided he may be there is something noble in his unselfishness, in his steady fixedness of purpose. The prince's face indicated his contempt. Such men, he declared, are only fit to be crushed like vermin underfoot. In any other country save England we should have dealt with him differently. This is all beside the question, she declared. My task was to prevent his becoming Prime Minister, and I have succeeded. The prince gave vent to a little gesture of dissent. Your task, he said, went a little farther than that. We require his political ruin. She pointed to the pile of newspapers upon the table. Read what they say, she exclaimed. There is not one who does not use that precise term. He has missed his opportunity. The people will never trust him again. That, at any rate, is not certain, the prince said. You must remember that before long he will realize that he has been your tool. What then? He will become more rabid than ever, more also to be feared. No, Lucille, your task is not yet over. He must be involved in an open and public scandal, and with you. She was white almost to the lips with passion. You expect a great deal. She exclaimed. You expect me to ruin my life, then, to give my honor as well as these weary months, this constant humiliation. You are pleased to be melodramatic, he said coldly. It is quite possible to involve him without actually going to extremes. And what of my husband? She asked. The prince laughed unpleasantly. If you have not taught him complaisance, he said, it is possible, of course, that Mr. Sabin might be unkind. But what of it? You are your own mistress. You are a woman of the world. Without him there is an infinitely greater future before you than as his wife you could ever enjoy. You are pleased, she said, to be enigmatic. The prince looked hard at her. Her face was white and set. He sighed. Lucille, he said, I have been very patient for many years. Yet you know very well my secret, and in your heart you know very well that I am one of those who generally win the thing upon which they have set their hearts. I have always loved you, Lucille, but never more than now. Fidelity is admirable, but surely you have done your duty. He is an old man, and a man who has failed in the great things of life. I, on the other hand, can offer you a great future. Saxe-Leinitzer, as you know, is a kingdom of its own, and, Lucille, I stand well with the emperor. The Socialist Party in Berlin is strong and increasing. He needs us. Who can say what honors may not be in store for us? For I, too, am of the royal house, Lucille. I am his kinsman. He never forgets that. Come, throw aside this restlessness. I will tell you how to deal with Brot, and the publicity, after all, will be nothing. We will go abroad directly afterwards. Have you finished? She asked. You will be reasonable, he begged. Reasonable. She turned upon him with flashing eyes. I wonder how you ever dared to imagine that I could tolerate you for one moment as a lover or a husband. Wipe it out of your mind once and for all. You are repellent to me. Positively the only wish I have in connection with you is never to see your face again. As for my duty, I have done it. My conscience is clear. I shall leave this house today. I hope, the prince said softly, that you will do nothing rash. In an hour, she said, I shall be at the Carlton with my husband. I will trust to him to protect me from you. The prince shook his head. You talk rashly, he said. You do not think. You are forbidden to leave this house. You are forbidden to join your husband. She laughed scornfully, but underneath was a tremor of uneasiness. You summoned me from America, she said, and I came. I was forced to leave my husband without even a word of farewell. I did it. You set me a task, I have accomplished it. I claim that I have kept my bond, that I have worked out my own freedom. If you require more of me, I say that you are overstepping your authority, and I refuse. Set the black cross against my name if you will. I will take the risk. The prince came a little nearer to her. She held her own bravely enough, but there was a look in his face which terrified her. Lucille, he said, you force me to disclose something which I have kept so far to myself. I wish to spare you anxiety, but you must understand that your safety depends upon your remaining in this house, and in keeping apart from all association with your husband. You will find it difficult, she said, to convince me of that. On the contrary, he said, I shall find it easy, too easy, believe me. You will remember my finding you at the wine shop of Emile Saxe. Yes. You refused to tell me the object of your visit. It was foolish, for of course I was informed. You procured from Emile a small quantity of the powder prepared according to the recipe of Herr Estentrausen, and for which we paid him 10,000 marks. It is the most silent, the most secret, the most swift poison yet discovered. I got it for myself, she said coldly. There have been times when I have felt that the possession of something of that sort was an absolute necessity. I do not question you as to the reason for your getting it, he answered. Very shortly afterwards you left your carriage in Pall Mall, and without even asking for your husband you called at his hotel, you stole up into his room. I took some roses there and left them, she said. What of that? Only that you were the last person seen to enter Mr. Sabin's rooms before Deussen was found there dead. And Deussen died from a dose of that same poison, a packet of which you procured secretly from Emile Saxe. An empty wineglass was by his side, it was one generally used by Mr. Sabin. I know that the English police, who are not so foolish as people would have one believe, are searching now for the woman who was seen to enter the sitting room shortly before Mr. Sabin returned and found Deussen there dead. She laughed scornfully. It is ingenious, she admitted, and perhaps a little unfortunate for me. But the inference is ridiculous. What interest had I in the man's death? None, of course. The prince said. But, Lucille, in all cases of poisoning it is the wife of whom one first thinks. The wife. I did not even know that the creature had a wife. Of course not. But Doosan drank from Mr. Sabin's glass, and you are Mr. Sabin's wife. You are living apart from him. He is old and you are young. And for the other man, there is Reginald Brott. Your names have been coupled together, of course. See what an excellent case stands there. You procure the poison, secretly. You make your way to your husband's room, secretly. The fatal dose is taken from your husband's wineglass. You leave no note, no message. The poison of which the man died is exactly the same as you procured from Saxe. Lucille, after all, do you wonder that the police are looking for a woman in black with an ermine toque? What a mercy you wore a thick veil. She sat down suddenly. This is hideous, she said. Think it over, he said, step by step. It is wonderful how all the incidents dovetail into one another. Too wonderful, she cried. It sounds like some vile plot to incriminate me. How much had you to do with this, Prince? Don't be a fool, he answered roughly. Can't you see for yourself that your arrest would be the most terrible thing that could happen for us? Even Saxe might break down in cross-examination, and you, well, you are a woman, and you want to live. We should all be in the most deadly peril. Lucille, I would have spared you this anxiety if I could, but your defiance made it necessary. There was no other way of getting you away from England tonight except by telling you the truth. Away from England tonight, she repeated vaguely. But I will not go. It is impossible. It is imperative, the prince declared, with a sharp ring of authority in his tone. It is your own folly, for which you have to pay. You went secretly to Emile Saxe. You paid surreptitious visits to your husband, which was simply madness. You have involved us all in danger. For our own sakes we must see that you are removed. It is the very thing to excite suspicion. Flight abroad, she objected. Your flight, he said coolly, will be looked upon from a different point of view, for Reginald Brott must follow you. It will be an elopement, not a flight from justice. And in case I should decline? Lucille asked quietly. The prince shrugged his shoulders. Well, we have done the best we can for ourselves, he said. Come, I will be frank with you. There are great interests involved here, and, before all things, I have had to consider the welfare of our friends. That is my duty. Emile Saxe by this time is beyond risk of detection. He has left behind a letter, in which he confesses that he has for some time supplemented the profits of his wine shop by selling secretly certain deadly poisons of his own concoctions. Alarmed at reading of the death of Doosan immediately after he had sold a poison which the symptoms denoted he had fled the country. That letter is in the hands of the woman who remains in the wine shop, and will only be used in case of necessity. By other means we have dissociated ourselves from Doosan and all connection with him. I think I could go so far as to say that it would be impossible to implicate us. Our sole anxiety now, therefore, is to save you. Lucille rose to her feet. I shall go at once to my husband, she said. I shall tell him everything. I shall act on his advice. The prince stood over by the door, and she heard the key turn. You will do nothing of the sort, he said quietly. You are in my power at last, Lucille. You will do my bidding, or what? I shall myself send for the police and give you into custody. Chapter 35. The prince crossed the hall and entered the morning room. Felix was there and Raoul de Bruyac. The Duchess sat at her writing table, scribbling a note. Lady Carey, in a wonderful white serge costume, and a huge bunch of Neapolitan violets at her bosom, was lounging in an easy chair, swinging her foot backwards and forwards. The Duke, in a very old tweed coat, but immaculate as to linen and the details of his toilet, stood a little apart, with a frown upon his forehead, and exactly that absorbed air which in the House of Lords usually indicated his intention to make a speech. The entrance of the prince, who carefully closed the door behind him, was an event for which evidently they were all waiting. My good people, he said blandly, I wish you all a very good morning. There was a little murmur of greetings, and before they had all subsided the Duke spoke. Saxe Leinitzer, he said, I have a few questions to ask you. The prince looked across the room at him. By all means, Duke, he said. But is the present an opportune time? Opportune or no, it is the time which I have selected, the Duke answered stiffly. I do not altogether understand what is going on in this house. I am beginning to wonder whether I have been misled. The prince, as he twirled his fair moustache, glanced carelessly enough across at the Duchess. She was looking the other way. I became a general member of this society, the Duke continued, sympathizing heartily with its objects as explained to me by you, Prince, and believing, although to confess it is somewhat of a humiliation, that a certain amount of combination amongst the aristocracy has become necessary to resist the terrible increase of socialism which we must all so much deplore. You are not making a speech, dear, the Duchess remarked, looking coldly across the room at him. We are all anxious to hear what the Prince has to say to us. Your anxiety, the Duke continued, and the anxiety of our friends must be restrained for a few minutes, for there are certain things which I am determined to say, and to say them now. I must confess that it was at first a painful shock to me to realize that the time had come when it was necessary for us to take any heed of the uneducated rabble who seem born into the world discontented with their station in life, and instead of making honest attempts to improve it waste their time railing against us who are more fortunately placed and in endeavors to mislead in every possible way the electorate of the country. The Prince sighed softly, and lit a cigarette. Lady Carey and Felix were already smoking. However, the Duke continued, I was convinced. I have always believed in the principle of watching closely the various signs of the times, and I may say that I came to the conclusion that a combination of the thinking members of the aristocratic party throughout the world was an excellent idea. I therefore became what is, I believe, called a general member of the order, of which I believe you, Prince, are the actual head. My dear James, the Duchess murmured, the Prince has something to say to us. The Prince, her husband answered coldly, can keep back his information for a few minutes. I am determined to place my position clearly before all of you who are present here now. It is only since I have joined this society that I have been made aware that in addition to the general members, of which body I believe that the Duchess and I are the sole representatives here, there are special members and members of the inner circle. And I understand that in connection with these there is a great machinery of intrigue going on all the time, with branches all over the world, spies everywhere with unlimited funds and with huge opportunities of good or evil. In effect, I have become an outside member of what is nothing more nor less than a very powerful and, it seems to me, daring secret society. So far as you are concerned, Duke, the Prince said, your responsibility ceases with ordinary membership. You can take no count of anything beyond. The time may come when the inner circle may be open to you. The Duke coughed. You misapprehend me, he said. I can assure you I am not anxious for promotion. On the contrary, I stand before you an aggrieved person. I have come to the conclusion that my house, and the shelter of my wife's name, have been used for a plot, the main points of which have been kept wholly secret from me. The Prince flicked his cigarette ash into the grate. My dear Dorset, he said gently, if you will allow me to explain, I thank you, Saxe-Leinitzer, the Duke said coldly, but it is beginning to occur to me that I have had enough of your explanations. It seemed natural enough to me, and I must say well conceived, that some attempt should be made to modify the views of, if not wholly convert, Reginald Brott by means of the influence of a very charming woman. It was my duty as a member of the order to assist in this, and the shelter of my house and name were freely accorded to the Countess. But it is news to me to find that she was brought here practically by force. That because she was an inner member and therefore bound to implicit obedience that she was dragged away from her husband, kept apart from him against her will, forced into endeavors to make a fool of Brott even at the cost of her good name. And now, worst of all, I am told that a very deeply laid plot on the part of some of you will compel her to leave England almost at once, and that her safety depends upon her inducing Reginald Brott to accompany her. She has appealed to you, the Prince muttered. She has done nothing so sensible, the Duke answered dryly. The facts which I have just stated are known to every one in this room. I perhaps know less than anyone. But I know enough for this. I request, Saxe-Leinitzer, that you withdraw the name of myself and my wife from your list of members, and that you understand clearly that my house is to be no more used for meetings of the society, formal or informal. And, further, though I regret the apparent inhospitality of my action, my finger is now, as you see, upon the bell, and I venture to wish you all a very good morning. Groves, he added to the servant who answered the door, the Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer's carriage is urgently required. The Prince and Lady Carey descended the broad steps side by side. She was laughing softly but immoderately. The Prince was pale with fury. Pompous old ass, he muttered savagely. He may have a worse scandal in his house now than he dreams of. She wiped her eyes. Have I not always told you, she said, that intrigue in this country was a sheer impossibility? You may lay your plans ever so carefully, but you cannot foresee such a contretemps as this. Idiot! The Prince cried. Oh, the dolt! Why, even his wife was amazed. He may be all those pleasant things, Lady Carey said, but he is a gentleman. He stopped short. The footman was standing by the side of Lady Carey's Victoria with a rug on his arm. Lucille, he said thoughtfully, is locked in the morning room. She is prostrate with fear. If the Duke sees her, everything is over. Upon my word, I have a good mind to throw this all up and cross to Paris tonight. Let England breed her own revolutions. What do you say, Muriel? Will you come with me? She laughed scornfully. I'd as soon go with my coachman, she said. His eyebrows narrowed. A dull, purple flush crept to his forehead. Your wit, he said, is a little coarse. Listen, you wish our first plan to go through. Of course. Then you must get Lucille out of that house. If she is left there, she is absolutely lost to us. Apart from that, she is herself not safe. Our plan worked out too well. She is really in danger from this Deucen affair. The laughter died away from Lady Carey's face. She hesitated with her foot upon the step of her carriage. You can go back easily enough, the prince said. You are the Duke's cousin, and you were not included in his tirade. Lucille is in the morning room, and here is the key. I brought it away with me. You must tell her that all our plans are broken, that we have certain knowledge that the police are on the track of this Deucen affair. Get her to your house in Pont Street, and I will be round this afternoon. Or better still, take her to mine. Lady Carey stepped back onto the pavement. She was still, however, hesitating. Leave her with the Duke and Duchess, the prince said, and she will dine with her husband tonight. Lady Carey took the key from his hand. I will try, she said. How shall you know whether I succeed? I will wait in the gardens, he answered. I shall be out of sight, but I shall be able to see you come out. If you are alone, I shall come to you. If she is with you, I shall be at your house in an hour, and I promise you that she shall leave England tonight with me. Poor Brot, she murmured ironically. The prince smiled. He will follow her. Everyone will believe that they left London together. That is all that is required. Lady Carey re-entered the house. The prince made his way into the gardens. 10 minutes passed, a quarter of an hour. Then Lady Carey with Lucille reappeared, and stepping quickly into the Victoria were driven away. The prince drew a little sigh of relief. He looked at his watch, called a hansom, and drove to his club for lunch. Another man, who had also been watching Dorset House from the gardens for several hours, also noted Lucille's advent with relief. He followed the prince out and entered another hansom. Follow that Victoria which has just driven off, he ordered. Don't lose sight of it. Double fare. The trapdoor fell, and the man whipped up his horse. Chapter 36. Mr. Sabin received an early visitor whilst still lingering over a slight but elegant breakfast. Passmore seated himself in an easy chair and accepted the cigar which his host himself selected for him. I am glad to see you, Mr. Sabin said. This affair at Deucens remains a complete mystery to me. I am looking to you to help me solve it. The little man with the imperturbable face removed his cigar from his mouth and contemplated it steadfastly. It is mysterious, he said. There are circumstances in connection with it which even now puzzle me very much indeed. There are circumstances in connection with it also which I fear may be a shock to you, sir. My life, Mr. Sabin said, with a faint smile, has been made up of shocks. A few more or less may not hurt me. Deucen, the detective said, was at heart a faithful servant. I believe it, Mr. Sabin said. He was much attached to you. I believe it. It is possible that unwittingly he died for you. Mr. Sabin was silent. It was his way of avoiding a confession of surprise. And he was surprised. You believe then, he said, after a moment's pause, that the poison was intended for me. Certainly I do, the detective answered. Deucen was, after all, a valet, a person of little importance. There is no one to whom his removal could have been of sufficient importance to justify such extreme measures. With you it is different. Mr. Sabin knocked the ash from his cigarette. Why not be frank with me, Mr. Passmore? He said. There is no need to shelter yourself under professional reticence. Your connection with Scotland Yard ended, I believe, some time ago. You are free to speak or to keep silence. Do one or the other. Tell me what you think, and I will tell you what I know. That surely will be a fair exchange. You shall have my facts for your surmises. Passmore's thin lips curled into a smile. You know that I have left Scotland Yard then, sir? Quite well. You were employed by them often, I believe, but you were not on the staff, not since the affair of Nerman and the code book. If Passmore had been capable of reverence, his eyes looked at that moment. You knew this last night, sir? Certainly. 5 years ago, sir, he said, I told my chief that in you the detective police of the world had lost one who must have been their king. More and more you convince me of it. I cannot believe that you are ignorant of the salient points concerning Dewson's death. Treat me as being so, at any rate, Mr. Sabin said. I am pardoned, Passmore said, for speaking plainly of family matters, my concern in which is of course purely professional. Mr. Sabin looked up for a moment, but he signified his assent. You left America, Passmore said, in search of your wife, formerly Countess of Radence, who had left you unexpectedly. It is true, Mr. Sabin answered. Madame la Duchess on reaching London became the guest of the Duchess of Dorset, where she has been staying since. Whilst there she has received many visits from Mr. Reginald Brott. Mr. Sabin's face was as the face of a sphinx. He made no sign. You do not waste your time, sir, over the society papers. Yet you have probably heard that Madame la Duchess and Mr. Reginald Brott have been written about and spoken about as intimate friends. They have been seen together everywhere. Gossip has been busy with their names. Mr. Brott has followed the Countess into circles which before her coming he zealously eschewed. The Countess is everywhere regarded as a widow, and a marriage has been confidently spoken of. Mr. Sabin bowed his head slightly, but of expression there was in his face no sign. These things, Passmore continued, are common knowledge. I have spoken up to now of nothing which is not known to the world. I proceed differently. Good, Mr. Sabin said. There is, Passmore continued, in the foreign district of London a man named Emile Sachs, who keeps a curious sort of a wine shop, and supplements his earnings by disposing at a high figure of certain rare and deadly poisons. A few days ago the Countess visited him and secured a small packet of the most deadly drug the man possesses. Mr. Sabin sat quite still. He was unmoved. The Countess, Passmore continued, shortly afterwards visited these rooms. An hour after her departure Dewson was dead. He died from drinking out of your liqueur glass, into which a few specks of that powder, invisible almost to the naked eye, had been dropped. At Dorset House Reginald Brott was waiting for her. He left shortly afterwards in a state of agitation. And from these things, Mr. Sabin said, you draw, I presume, the natural inference that Madame la Duchess, desiring to marry her old admirer, Reginald Brott, first left me in America, and then, since I followed her here, attempted to poison me. There is, Passmore said, a good deal of evidence to that effect. Here, Mr. Sabin said, handing him Dewson's letter, is some evidence to the contrary. Passmore read the letter carefully. You believe this, he asked, to be genuine. Mr. Sabin smiled. I am sure of it. He answered. You recognize the handwriting? Certainly. And this came into your possession, how? I found it on the table by Dewson's side. You intend to produce it at the inquest? I think not, Mr. Sabin answered. There was a short silence. Passmore was revolving a certain matter in his mind, thinking hard. Mr. Sabin was apparently trying to make rings of the blue smoke from his cigarette. Has it occurred to you, Passmore asked, to wonder for what reason your wife visited these rooms on the morning of Dewson's death? Mr. Sabin shook his head. I cannot say that it has. She knew that you were not here, Passmore continued. She left no message. She came closely veiled and departed unrecognized. Mr. Sabin nodded. There were reasons, he said, for that. But when you say that she left no message you are mistaken. Passmore nodded. Go on, he said. Mr. Sabin nodded towards a great vase of La France roses upon a side table. I found these here on my return, he said, and attached to them the card which I believe is still there. Go and look at it. Passmore rose and bent over the fragrant blossoms. The card still remained, and on the back of it, in a delicate feminine handwriting. For my husband, with love from Lucille. Mr. Passmore shrugged his shoulders. He had not the vice of obstinacy, and he knew when to abandon a theory. I am corrected, he said. In any case, a mystery remains as well worth solving. Who are these people at whose instigation Dewson was to have murdered you, these people whom Dewson feared so much that suicide was his only alternative to obeying their behests? Mr. Sabin smiled faintly. Ah, my dear Passmore, he said, you must not ask me that question. I can only answer you in this way. If you wish to make the biggest sensation which has ever been created in the criminal world, to render yourself immortal, and your fame imperishable, find out. I may not help you, I doubt whether you will find any to help you. But if you want excitement, the excitement of a dangerous chase after a tremendous quarry, take your life in your hands, go in and win. Passmore's withered little face lit up with a gleam of rare excitement. These are your enemies, sir, he said. They have attempted your life once, they may do it again. Assume the offensive yourself. Give me a hint. Mr. Sabin shook his head. That I cannot do, he said. I have saved you from wasting your time on a false scent. I have given you something definite to work upon. Further than that I can do nothing. Passmore looked his disappointment, but he knew Mr. Sabin better than to argue the matter. You will not even produce that letter at the inquest? He asked. Not even that, Mr. Sabin answered. Passmore rose to his feet. You must remember, he said, that supposing anyone else stumbles upon the same trail as I have been pursuing, and suspicion is afterwards directed towards Madam, your not producing that letter at the inquest will make it useless as evidence in her favor. I have considered all these things, Mr. Sabin said. I shall deposit the letter in a safe place. But its use will never be necessary. You are the only man who might have forced me to produce it, and you know the truth. Passmore rose reluctantly. I want you, Mr. Sabin said, to leave me not only your address, but the means of finding you at any moment during the next 24 hours. I may have some important work for you. The man smiled as he tore leaf from his pocketbook and made a few notes. I shall be glad to take any commission from you, sir, he said. To tell you the truth, I scarcely thought that you would be content to sit down and wait. Mr. Sabin smiled. I think, he said, that very shortly I can find you plenty to do. Chapter 37. Mr. Sabin a few minutes afterwards ordered his carriage, and was driven to Dorset House. He asked for Lucille, but was shown at once into the library, where the Duke was awaiting him. Then Mr. Sabin knew that something had happened. The Duke extended his hand solemnly. My dear Souspenia, he said, I am glad to see you. I was in fact on the point of dispatching a messenger to your hotel. I am glad, Mr. Sabin remarked, that my visit is opportune. To tell you the truth, Duke, I am anxious to see my wife. The Duke coughed. I trust, he said, that you will not for a moment consider me guilty of any discourtesy to the Countess, for whom I have a great respect and liking. But it has come to my knowledge that the shelter of my roof and name were being given to proceedings of which I heartily disapproved. I therefore only a few hours ago formally broke off all connection with Saxe Leinitzer and his friends, and to put the matter plainly, I expelled them from the house. I congratulate you heartily, Duke, upon a most sensible proceeding, Mr. Sabin said. But in the meantime where is my wife? Your wife was not present at the time, the Duke answered, and I had not the slightest intention of including her in the remarks I made. Whether she understood this or not I cannot say, but I have since been given to understand that she left with them. How long ago? Mr. Sabin asked. Several hours, I fear, the Duke answered. I should like, Souspenia, to express to you my regrets that I was ever induced to become connected in any way with proceedings which must have caused you a great deal of pain. I beg you to accept my apologies. I do not blame you, Duke, Mr. Sabin said. My one desire now is to wrest my wife away from this gang. Can you tell me whether she left alone or with any of them? I will endeavor to ascertain, the Duke said, ringing the bell. But before the Duke's somewhat long-winded series of questions had gone very far, Mr. Sabin grasped the fact that the servants had been tampered with. Without wasting any more time he took a somewhat hurried leave and drove back to the hotel. One of the hall porters approached him, smiling. There is a lady waiting for you in your rooms, sir, he announced. She arrived a few minutes ago. Mr. Sabin rang for the elevator, got out at his floor and walked down the corridor, leaning a little more heavily than usual upon his stick. If indeed it were Lucille who had braved all and come to him, the way before them might still be smooth sailing. He would never let her go again. He was sure of that. They would leave England, yes, there was time still to catch the 5 o'clock train. He turned the handle of his door and entered. A familiar figure rose from the depths of his easy chair. Her hat lay on the table, her jacket was open, one of his cigarettes was between her lips. But it was not Lucille. Lady Carey, he said slowly, this is an unexpected pleasure. Have you brought Lucille with you? I am afraid, she answered, that I have no rope strong enough. You insinuate, he remarked, that Lucille would be unwilling to come. There is no longer any need, she declared, with a hard little laugh, for insinuations. We have all been turned out from Dorset House neck and crop. Lucille has accepted the inevitable. She has gone to Reginald Sprot's rooms. Mr. Sabin smiled. Indeed, I have just come from Dorset House myself. The Duke has supplied me with a highly entertaining account of his sudden awakening. The situation must have been humorous. Her eyes twinkled. It was really screamingly funny. The Duke had on his House of Lords manner, and we all sat round like a lot of naughty children. If only you had been there. Mr. Sabin smiled. Suddenly she laid her hand upon his arm. Victor, she said, I have come to prove that I am your friend. You do not believe that Lucille is with Reginald Brott. It is true. Not only that, but she is leaving England with him tonight. The man's devotion is irresistible. He has been gaining on her slowly but surely all the time. I have noticed, Mr. Sabin remarked calmly, that he has been wonderfully assiduous. I am sure I congratulate him upon his success, if he has succeeded. You doubt my word, of course, she said. But I have not come here to tell you things. I have come to prove them. I presume that what you see with your own eyes will be sufficient. Mr. Sabin shook his head. Certainly not, he answered. I make it a rule to believe nothing that I see, and never to trust my ears. She stamped her foot lightly upon the floor. How impossible you are, she exclaimed. I can tell you by what train Lucille and Reginald Brott will leave London tonight. I can tell you why Lucille is bound to go. Now, Mr. Sabin said, you are beginning to get interesting. Lucille must go, or run the risk of arrest for complicity in the murder of Dewson. Are you serious? Mr. Sabin asked, with admirably assumed gravity. Is it a jesting matter? She answered fiercely. Lucille bought poison, the same poison which it will be proved that Dewson died of. She came here, she was the last person to enter your room before Dewson was found dead. The police are even now searching for her. Escape is her only chance. Dear me, Mr. Sabin said. Then it is not only for Brott's sake that she is running away. What does that matter? She is going, and she is going with him. And why, he asked, do you come to give me warning? I have plenty of time to interpose. You can try if you will. Lucille is in hiding. She will not see you if you go to her. She is determined. Indeed, she has no choice. Lucille is a brave woman in many ways, but you know that she fears death. She is in a corner. She is forced to go. Again, he said, I feel that I must ask you, why do you give me warning? She came and stood close to him. Perhaps, she said earnestly, I am anxious to earn your gratitude. Perhaps, too, I know that no interposition of yours would be of any avail. Mr. Sabin smiled. Still, he said, I do not think that it is wise of you. I might appear at the station and forcibly prevent Lucille's departure. After all, she is my wife, you know. She shrugged her shoulders. I am not afraid, she said. You will make inquiries when I have gone, and you will find out that I have spoken the truth. If you keep Lucille in England you will expose her to a terrible risk. It is not like you to be selfish. You will yield to necessity. Will you tell me where Lucille is now? He asked. For your own sake and hers, no, she answered. You also are watched. Besides, it is too late. She was with Brott half an hour after the Duke turned us out of Dorset House. Don't you understand, Victor, won't you? It is too late. He sat down heavily in his easy chair. His whole appearance was one of absolute dejection. So I am to be left alone in my old age, he murmured. You have your revenge now at last. You have come to take it. She sank on her knees by the side of his chair, and her arms fell upon his shoulders. How can you think so cruelly of me, Victor, she murmured. You were always a little mistaken in Lucille. She loved you, it is true, but all her life she has been fond of change and excitement. She came to Europe willingly, long before this Brott would have been her slave save for your reappearance. Can't you forget her, for a little while? Mr. Sabin sat quite still. Her hair brushed his cheeks, her arms were about his neck, her whole attitude was an invitation for his embrace. But he sat like a figure of stone, neither repulsing nor encouraging her. You need not be alone unless you like, she whispered. I am an old man, he said slowly, and this is a hard blow for me to bear. I must be sure, absolutely sure that she has gone. By this time tomorrow, she murmured, all the world will know it. Come to me then, he said. I shall need consolation. Her eyes were bright with triumph. She leaned over him and kissed him on the lips. Then she sprang lightly to her feet. Wait here for me, she said, and I will come to you. You shall know, Victor, that Lucille is not the only woman in the world who has cared for you. There was a tap at the door. Lady Carey was busy adjusting her hat. Passmore entered, and stood hesitating upon the threshold. Mr. Sabin had risen to his feet. He took one of her hands and raised it to his lips. She gave him a swift, wonderful look and passed out. Mr. Sabin's manner changed as though by magic. He was at once alert and vigorous. "My dear Passmore," he said, "come to the table. We shall want those continental timetables and the London ABCU will have to take a journey tonight." Chapter 38. The two women were alone in the morning room of Lady Carey's house in Pont Street. Lucille was walking restlessly up and down, twisting her handkerchief between her fingers. Lady Carey was watching her, more composed, to all outward appearance, but with closely compressed lips, and boding gleam in her eyes. "I think," Lady Carey said, "that you had better see him." Lucille turned almost fiercely upon her. "And why?" "Well, for one thing he will not understand your refusal. He may be suspicious." "What does it matter? I have finished with him. I have done all that I pledged myself to. What more can be expected of me? I do not wish to see him again." Lady Carey laughed. "At least," she said, "I think that the poor man has a right to receive his congé from you. You cannot break with him without a word of explanation. Perhaps, you may not find it so easy as it seems." Lucille swept around. "What do you mean?" Lady Carey shrugged her shoulders. "You are in a curious mood, my dear Lucille. What I mean is obvious enough. Brod is a strong man and a determined man. I do not think that he will enjoy being made a fool of." Lucille was indifferent. "At any rate," she said, "I shall not see him. I have quite made up my mind about that." "And why not, Countess?" a deep voice asked from the threshold. "What have I done? May I not at least know my fault?" Lady Carey rose and moved towards the door. "You shall have it out between yourselves," she declared, looking up, and nodding at Brod as she passed. "Don't fight. Muriel." The cry was imperative, but Lady Carey had gone. Mr. Brod closed the door behind him and confronted Lucille. A brilliant spot of color flared in her pale cheeks. "But this is a trap," she exclaimed. "Who sent for you? Why did you come?" He looked at her in surprise. "Lucille." His eyes were full of passionate remonstrance. She looked nervously from him towards the door. He intercepted her glance. "What have I done?" he asked fiercely. "What have I failed to do? Why do you look as though I had forced myself upon you? Haven't I the right? Don't you wish to see me?" In Brod's face and tone was all the passionate strenuousness of a great crisis. Lucille felt suddenly helpless before the directness of his gaze, his storm of questions. In all their former intercourse it had been she who, by virtue of her sex and his blind love for her, had kept the upper hand. And now the position was changed. All sorts of feeble explanations, of appeals to him, occurred to her dimly, only to be rejected by reason of their ridiculous inadequacy. She was silent, abjectly silent. He came a little closer to her, and the strength of the man was manifest in his intense self-restraint. His words were measured, his tone quiet. Yet both somehow gave evidence of the smoldering fires beneath. "Lucille," he said, "I find you hard to understand today. You have made me your slave, you came once more into my life at its most critical moment, and for your sake I have betrayed a great trust. My conscience, my faith, and although that counts for little, my political career, were in the balance against my love for you. You know which conquered. At your bidding I have made myself the jest of every man who buys the halfpenny paper and calls himself a politician. My friends heap abuse upon me, my enemies derision. I cannot hold my position in this new cabinet. I had gone too far for compromise. I wonder if you quite understand what has happened." "Oh, I have heard too much," she cried. "Spare me the rest," he continued as though he had not heard her. "Men who have been my intimate associates for many years, and whose friendship was dear to me, cross the road to avoid meeting me. Day by day I am besieged with visitors and letters from the suffering people to whom my word had been pledged, imploring me for some explanation, for one word of denial. Life has become a hell for me, a pestilent, militant hell. Yet, Lucille, unless you break faith with me I make no complaint. I am content." "I am very sorry," she said. "I do not think that you have properly understood me. I have never made you any promise." For a moment he lost control of himself. She shrank back at the blaze of indignation, half scornful, half incredulous, which lit up his clear, gray eyes. "It is a lie," he answered. "Between you and me it can be no question of words. You were always very careful of your pledges, but there are limits even to your caution, as to my forbearance. A woman does not ask a man who is pleading to her for her love to give up everything else he cares for in life without hope of reward. It is monstrous. I never sought you under false pretenses. I never asked you for your friendship. I wanted you. I told you so plainly. You won't deny that you gave me hope, encouraged me. You can't even deny that I am within my rights if I claim now at this instant the reward for my apostasy." Her hands were suddenly locked in his. She felt herself being drawn into his arms. With a desperate effort she avoided his embrace. He still held her left wrist, and his face was dark with passion. "Let me go," she pleaded. "Not I," he answered, with an odd, choked little laugh. "You belong to me. I have paid the price. I, too, am amongst the long list of those poor fools who have sold their gods and their honor for a woman's kiss. But I will not be left wholly destitute. You shall pay me for what I have lost." "Oh, you are mad," she answered. "How could you have deceived yourself so? Don't you know that my husband is in London?" "The man who calls himself Mr. Sabin," he answered roughly. "What has that to do with it? You are living apart. Saxe Leinitzer and the Duchess have both told me the history of your married life. Or is the whole thing a monstrous lie?" he cried, with a sudden dawning sense of the truth. "Nonsense. I won't believe it. Lucille, you're not afraid. I shall be good to you. You don't doubt that. Sabin will divorce you, of course. You won't lose your friends. I—" There was a sudden loud tapping at the door. Brot dropped her wrist and turned round with an exclamation of anger. To Lucille it was a heaven-sent interposition. The prince entered, pale, and with signs of hurry and disorder about his usually immaculate person. "You are both here," he exclaimed. "Good. Lucille, I must speak with you urgently in 5 minutes. Brot, come this way with me." Lucille sank into a chair with a little murmur of relief. The prince led Brot into another room, and closed the door carefully behind him. "Mr. Brot," he said, "can I speak to you as a friend of Lucille's?" Brot, who distrusted the prince, looked him steadily in the face. Saxe Leinitzer's agitation was too apparent to be wholly assumed. He had all the appearance of being a man desperately in earnest. "I have always considered myself one," Brot answered. "I am beginning to doubt, however, whether the Countess holds me in the same estimation." "You found her hysterical, unreasonable, overwrought," the prince exclaimed. "That is so, eh?" The prince drew a long breath. "Brot," he said, "I am forced to confide in you. Lucille is in terrible danger. I am not sure that there is anybody who can effectually help her but you. Are you prepared to make a great sacrifice for her sake, to leave England at once, to take her to the uttermost part of the world?" Brot's eyes were suddenly bright. The prince quailed before the fierceness of his gaze. "She would not go," he exclaimed sharply. "She will," the prince answered. "She must. Not only that, but you will earn her eternal gratitude. Listen, I must tell you the predicament in which we find ourselves. It places Lucille's life in your hands." "What?" The exclamation came like a pistol shot. The prince held up his hand. "Do not interrupt. Let me speak. Every moment is very valuable. You heard without doubt of the sudden death at the Carlton Hotel. It took place in Mr. Sabin's sitting room. The victim was Mr. Sabin's servant. The inquest was this afternoon. The verdict was death from the effect of poison. The police are hot upon the case. There was no evidence as to the person by whom the poison was administered, but by a hideous combination of circumstances one person before many hours have passed will be under the surveillance of the police." "And that person?" Brot asked. The prince looked round and lowered his voice, although the room was empty. "Lucille," he whispered hoarsely. Brot stepped backwards as though he were shot. "What damned folly!" he exclaimed. "It is possible that you may not think so directly," Saxe Leinitzer continued. "The day it happened Lucille bought this same poison, and it is a rare one, from a man who has absconded. An hour before this man was found dead, she called at the hotel, left no name, but went upstairs to Mr. Sabin's room, and was alone there for 5 minutes. The man died from a single grain of poison which had been introduced into Mr. Sabin's special liqueur glass, out of which he was accustomed to drink 3 or 4 times a day. All these are absolute facts, which at any moment may be discovered by the police. Added to that she is living apart from her husband, and is known to be on bad terms with him." Brot was gripping the back of a chair. He was white to the lips. "You don't think," he cried hoarsely. "You can't believe—" "No," the prince answered quickly, "I don't believe anything of the sort. I will tell you as man to man that I believe she wished Mr. Sabin dead. You yourself should know why. But no, I don't believe she went so far as that. It was an accident. But what we have to do is to save her. Will you help?" "Yes. She must cross to the continent tonight before the police get on the scent. Afterwards she must double back to Havre and take the Bordelais for New York on Saturday. Once there I can guarantee her protection. Well, she cannot go alone. You mean that I should go with her? Yes, get her right away, and I will employ special detectives and have the matter cleared up, if ever it can be. But if she remains here, I fear that nothing can save her from the horror of an arrest, even if afterwards we are able to save her. You yourself risk much, Brot. The only question that remains is, will you do it? At her bidding, yes, Brot declared. Wait here, the prince answered. Chapter 39. Saxe Leinitzer returned to the morning room, and taking the key from his pocket unlocked the door. Inside, Lucille was pale with fury. What? I am a prisoner, then? She exclaimed. How dare you lock me in? This is not your house. Let me pass. I am tired of all this stupid espionage. The prince stood with his back to the door. It is for your own sake, Lucille. The house is watched. She sank into a low chair, trembling. The prince had all the appearance of a man himself seriously disturbed. Lucille, he said, we will do what we can for you. The whole thing is horribly unfortunate. You must leave England tonight. Muriel will go with you. Her presence will help to divert suspicion. Once you can reach Paris, I can assure you of safety. But in this country I am almost powerless. I must see Victor, she said in a low tone. I will not go without. The prince nodded. I have thought of that. There is no reason, Lucille, why he should not be the one to lead you into safety. You mean that? She cried. I mean it, the prince answered. After what has happened, you are of course of no further use to us. I am inclined to think, too, that we have been somewhat exacting. I will send a messenger to Souspenia to meet you at Charing Cross tonight. She sprang up. Let me write it myself. Very well, he agreed, with a shrug of the shoulders. But do not address or sign it. There is danger in any communication between you. She took a sheet of notepaper and hastily wrote a few words. I have need of your help. Will you be at Charing Cross at 12 o'clock prepared for a journey, Lucille? The prince took the letter from her and hastily folded it up. I will deliver it myself, he announced. It will perhaps be safest. Until I return, Lucille, do not stir from the house or see anyone. Muriel has given the servants orders to admit no one. All your life, he added, after a moment's pause, you have been a little cruel to me, and this time also. I shall pray that you will relent before our next meeting. She rose to her feet and looked him full in the face. She seemed to be following out her own train of thought rather than taking note of his words. Even now, she said thoughtfully, I am not sure that I can trust you. I have a good mind to fight or scream my way out of this house, and go myself to see Victor. He shrugged his shoulders. The fighting or the screaming will not be necessary, dear Countess, he said. The doors are open to you. But it is as clear as day that if you go to the hotel or near it you will at once be recognized, and recognition means arrest. There is a limit beyond which one cannot help a willful woman. Take your life in your hands and go your own way, or trust in us who are doing our best to save you. And what of Reginald Brot? She asked. Brot, the prince repeated impatiently. Who cares what becomes of him? You have made him seem a fool, but, Lucille, to tell you the truth, I am sorry that we did not leave this country altogether alone. There is not the soil for intrigue here, or the possibility. Then, too, the police service is too stolid, too inaccessible. And even our friends, for whose aid we are here, well, you heard the Duke. The cast-iron Saxon idiocy of the man. The aristocracy here are what they call bucolic. It is their own fault. They have intermarried with parvenus and Americans for generations. They are a race by themselves. We others may shake ourselves free from them. I would work in any country of the globe for the good of our cause, but never again in England. Lucille shivered a little. I am not in the humor for argument, she declared. If you would earn my gratitude, take that note to my husband. He is the only man I feel sure of, whom I know can protect me. The prince bowed low. It is our farewell, Countess, he said. I cannot pretend, she answered, to regret it. Saxe Leinitzer left the room. There was a peculiar smile upon his lips as he crossed the hall. Brot was still awaiting for him. Mr. Brot, he said, the Countess is, as I feared, too agitated to see you again for the present, or anyone else. She sends you, however, this message. He took the folded paper from his waistcoat pocket and handed it to the other man. Brot read it through eagerly. His eyes shone. She accepts the situation, then, he exclaimed. Precisely. Will you pardon me, my friend, if I venture upon one other word? Lucille is not an ordinary woman. She is not in the least like the majority of her sex, especially, I might add, amongst us. The fact that her husband was living would seriously influence her consideration of any other man, as her lover. The present crisis, however, has changed everything. I do not think that you will have cause to complain of her lack of gratitude. Brot walked out into the streets with the half-sheet of notepaper twisted up between his fingers. For the first time for months he was conscious of a distinct and vivid sense of happiness. The terrible period of indecision was past. He knew now where he stood. Nor was his immediate departure from England altogether unpleasant to him. His political career was shattered, friends and enemies were alike cold to him. Such an act of cowardice as his, such pitiful shrinking back at the last fateful moment, was inexplicable and revolting. Even Letheringham was barely civil. It was certain that his place in the cabinet would be intolerable. He yearned for escape from it all, and the means of escape were now at hand. In after years he knew very well that the shadow of his broken trust, the torture of his misused opportunities, would stand forever between him and the light. But at that moment he was able to clear his mind of all such disquieting thoughts. He had won Lucille, never mind at what cost, at what peril. He had won Lucille. He was deeply engrossed, and his name was spoken twice in his ear before he turned round. A small, somewhat shabby-looking man, with tired eyes and more than a day's growth of beard upon his chin, had accosted him. "Mr. Brot, sir, a word with you, please." Brot held out his hand. Nevertheless his tone when he spoke lacked heartiness. "You, Headley, why, what brings you to London?" The little man did not seem to see the hand. At any rate he made no motion to take it. "A few minutes' chat with Mr. Brot. That's what I've come for." Brot raised his eyebrows, and nodded in somewhat constrained fashion. "Well," he said, "I am on my way to my rooms. We can talk as we go, if you like. I am afraid the good people up in your part of the world are not too well pleased with me." The little man smiled rather queerly. "That is quite true," he answered calmly. "They hate a liar and a turncoat. So do I." Brot stopped short upon the pavement. "If you are going to talk like that to me, Headley," he said, "the less you have to say the better." The man nodded. "Very well," he said. "What I have to say won't take me very long. But as I've tramped most of the way up here to say it, you'll have to listen here or somewhere else." "I thought you were always one who liked the truth." "So I do," Brot answered. "Go on." The man shuffled along by his side. They were an odd-looking pair, for Brot was rather a careful man as regards his toilet, and his companion looked little better than a tramp. "All my life," he continued, "I've been called Mad Headley, or Headley, the Mad Tailor. Sometimes one and sometimes the other. It don't matter which. There's truth in it. I am a bit mad. You, Mr. Brot, were one of those who understood me a little. I have brooded a good deal perhaps, and things have got muddled up in my brain. You know what has been at the bottom of it all. I began making speeches when I was a boy. People laughed at me, but I've set many a one thinking. I'm no anarchist, although people call me one. I'll admit that I admire the men who set the French Revolution going. If such a thing happened in this country I'd be one of the first to join in. But I've never had a taste for bloodshed. I'd rather the thing had been done without. From the first you seemed to be the man who might have brought it about. We listened to you, we watched your career, and we began to have hopes. Mr. Brot, the bodies and souls of millions of your fellow creatures were in the hollow of your hand. It was you who might have set 'em free. It was you who might have made this the greatest, the freest, the happiest country in the world. Not so much for us perhaps as for our children, and our children's children. We didn't expect a huge social upheaval in a week, or even a decade of years. But we did expect to see the first blow struck. Oh, yes, we expected that. I have disappointed you, I know, you and many others," Brot said bitterly. "I wish I could explain. But I can't." "Oh, it doesn't matter," the man answered. "You have broken the hearts of thousands of suffering men and women, you who might have led them into the light, have forged another bolt in the bars which stand between them and liberty. So they must live on in the darkness, dull, dumb creatures with just spirit enough to spit and curse at the sound of your name. It was the greatest trust God ever placed in one man's hand, and you abused it. They were afraid of you, the aristocrats, and they bought you. Oh, we are not blind up there, there are newspapers in our public houses, and now and then one can afford a halfpenny. We have read of you at their parties and their dances. Quite one of 'em you have become, haven't you? But, Mr. Brot, have you never been afraid? Have you never said to yourself, there is justice in the earth? Suppose it finds me out. Headley, you are talking rubbish, Brott said. Up here you would see things with different eyes. Leatheringham is pledged. If any man ever earned hell, Headley continued, it is you, Brott, you who came to us a deliverer, and turned out to be a lying prophet. Hell, he repeated fiercely, and may you find it swiftly. The man's right hand came out of his long pocket. They were in the thick of Piccadilly, but his action was too swift for any interference. 4 reports rang suddenly out, and the muzzle of the revolver was held deliberately within an inch or so of Brett's heart. And before even the nearest of the bystanders could realize what had happened, Brott lay across the pavement a dead man, and Headley was calmly handing over the revolver to a policeman who had sprang across the street. Be careful, officer, he said, there are still 2 chambers loaded. I will come with you quite quietly. That is Mr. Reginald Brott, the cabinet minister, and I have killed him. Chapter 40. For once, Lady Carey said, with a faint smile, your admirable Crayon has failed you. Lucille opened her eyes. She had been leaning back amongst the railway cushions. I think not, she said. Only I blame myself that I ever trusted the prince even so far as to give him that message. For I know very well that if Victor had received it he would have been here. Lady Carey took up a great pile of papers and looked them carelessly through. I am afraid, she said, that I do not agree with you. I do not think that Saxe-Leinitzer had any desire except to see you safely away. I believe that he will be quite as disappointed as you are that your husband is not here to aid you. Someone must see you safely on the steamer at Havre. Perhaps he will come himself. I shall wait in Paris, Lucille said quietly, for my husband. You may wait, Lady Carey said, for a very long time. Lucille looked at her steadily. What do you mean? What a fool you are, Lucille. If to other people it seems almost certain on the face of it that you were responsible for that drop of poison in your husband's liqueur glass, why should it not seem so to himself? Lucille laughed, but there was a look of horror in her dark eyes. How absurd. I know Victor better than to believe him capable of such a suspicion. Just as he knows me better than to believe me capable of such an act. Really? But you were in his rooms secretly just before. I went to leave some roses for him, Lucille answered. And if you would like to know it, I will tell you this. I left my card tied to them with a message for him. Lady Carey yawned. A remarkably foolish thing to do, she said. That may cause you trouble later on. Great heavens, what is this? She held the evening paper open in her hand. Lucille leaned over with blanched face. What has happened? She cried. Tell me, can't you? Reginald Brott has been shot in Piccadilly, Lady Carey said. Is he hurt? Lucille asked. He is dead. They read the brief announcement together. The deed had been committed by a man whose reputation for sanity had long been questioned, one of Brott's own constituents. He was in custody, and freely admitted his guilt. The 2 women looked at one another in horror. Even Lady Carey was affected. What a hateful thing, she said. I am glad that we had no hand in it. Are you so sure that we hadn't? Lucille asked bitterly. You see what it says. The man killed him because of his political apostasy. We had something to do with that at least. Lady Carey was recovering her sang-froid. Oh, well, she said, indirect influences scarcely count, or one might trace the causes of everything which happens back to an absurd extent. If this man was mad he might just as well have shot Brott for anything. Lucille made no answer. She leaned back and closed her eyes. She did not speak again till they reached Dover. They embarked in the drizzling rain. Lady Carey drew a little breath of relief as they reached their cabin, and felt the boat move beneath them. Thank goodness that we are really off. I have been horribly nervous all the time. If they let you leave England they can have no suspicion as yet. Lucille was putting on an ulster and cap to go out on deck. I am not at all sure, she said, that I shall not return to England. At any rate, if Victor does not come to me in Paris I shall go to him. What beautiful trust, Lady Carey answered. My dear Lucille, you are more like a schoolgirl than a woman of the world. A steward entered with a telegram for Lucille. It was banded in at the Haymarket, an hour before their departure. Lucille read it, and her face blanched. I thank you for your invitation, but I fear that it would not be good for my health, S. Lady Carey looked over her shoulder. She laughed hardly. How brutal, she murmured. But, then, Victor can be brutal sometimes, can't he? Lucille tore it into small pieces without a word. Lady Carey waited for a remark from her in vain. I, too, she said at last, have had some telegrams. I have been hesitating whether to show them to you or not. Perhaps you had better see them. She produced them and spread them out. The first was dated about the same time as the one Lucille had received. Have seen S with message from Lucille. Fear quite useless, as he believes worst. The second was a little longer. Have just heard S has left for Liverpool, and has engaged berth in Campania, sailing tomorrow. Break news to Lucille if you think well. Have wired him begging return, and promising full explanation. If these, Lucille said calmly, belong to me, I should treat them as I have my own. What do you mean? I should tear them up. Lady Carey shrugged her shoulders with the air of one who finds further argument hopeless. I shall have no more to say to you, Lucille, on this subject, she said. You are impossible. In a few days you will be forced to come round to my point of view. I will wait till then. And in the meantime, if you think I am going to tramp up and down those sloppy decks and gaze at the sea, you are very much mistaken. I am going to lie down like a civilized being, and try and get a nap. You had better do the same. Lucille laughed. For my part, she said, I find any part of the steamer except the deck intolerable. I am going now in search of some fresh air. Shall I send your woman along? Lady Carey nodded, for just then the steamer gave a violent lurch, and she was not feeling talkative. Lucille went outside and walked up and down until the lights of Calais were in sight. All the time she felt conscious of the observation of a small man clad in a huge mackintosh, whose peaked cap completely obscured his features. As they were entering the harbour she purposely stood by his side. He held onto the rail with one hand and turned towards her. It has been quite a rough passage, has it not? He remarked. She nodded. I have crossed, she said, when it has been much worse. I do not mind so long as one may come on deck. Your friend, he remarked, is perhaps not so good a sailor. I believe, Lucille said, that she suffers a great deal. I just looked in at her, and she was certainly uncomfortable. The little man gripped the rail and held on to his cap with the other hand. You are going to Paris? He asked. Lucille nodded. Yes. They were in smoother water now. He was able to relax his grip of the rail. He turned towards Lucille, and she saw him for the first time distinctly, a thin, wizened-up little man, with shrewd kindly eyes, and a long deeply cut mouth. I trust, he said, that you will not think me impertinent, but it occurred to me that you have noticed some apparent interest of mine in your movements since you arrived on the boat. Lucille nodded. It is true, she answered. That is why I came and stood by your side. What do you want with me? Nothing, madam, he answered. I am here altogether in your interests. If you should want help I shall be somewhere near you for the next few hours. Do not hesitate to appeal to me. My mission here is to be your protector should you need one. Lucille's eyes grew bright, and her heart beat quickly. Tell me, she said, who sent you? He smiled. I think that you know, he answered. One who I can assure you will never allow you to suffer any harm. I have exceeded my instructions in speaking to you, but I fancied that you were looking worried. You need not. I can assure you that you need have no cause. Her eyes filled with tears. I knew, she said, that those telegrams were forgeries. He looked carefully around. I know nothing about any telegrams, he said, but I am here to see that no harm comes to you, and I promise you that it shall not. Your friend is looking out of the cabin door. I think we may congratulate ourselves, madam, on an excellent passage. Lady Carey disembarked, a complete wreck, leaning on the arm of her maid, and with a bottle of smelling salts clutched in her hand. She slept all the way in the train, and only woke up when they were nearing Paris. She looked at Lucille in astonishment. Why, what on earth have you been doing to yourself? She exclaimed. You look disgustingly fit and well. Lucille laughed softly. Why not? I have had a nap, and we are almost at Paris. I only want a bath and a change of clothes to feel perfectly fresh. But Lady Carey was suspicious. Have you seen anyone you know upon the train? She asked. Lucille shook her head. Not a soul. A little man whom I spoke to on the steamer brought me some coffee. That is all. Lady Carey yawned and shook out her skirts. I suppose I'm getting old, she said. I couldn't look as you do with as much on my mind as you must have, and after traveling all night too. Lucille laughed. After all, she said, you know that I am a professional optimist, and I have faith in my luck. I have been thinking matters over calmly, and, to tell you the truth, I am not in the least alarmed. Lady Carey looked at her curiously. Has the optimism been imbibed, she asked, or is it spontaneous? Lucille smiled. Unless the little man in the plaid mackintosh poured it into the coffee with the milk, she said, I could not possibly have imbibed it, for I haven't spoken to another soul since we left Paris. Here we are, thank goodness. Celeste can see the things through the customs. She is quite used to it. We are going to the Ritz, I suppose. Chapter 41. At 8 o'clock in the evening Lucille knocked at the door of Lady Carey's suite of rooms at the hotel. There was no answer. A chambermaid who was near came smiling up. Milady has, I think, descended for dinner, she said. Lucille looked at her watch. She saw that she was a few minutes late, so she descended to the restaurant. The small table which they had reserved was, however, still unoccupied. Lucille told the waiter that she would wait for a few moments, and sent for an English newspaper. Lady Carey did not appear. A quarter of an hour passed. The head waiter came up with a benign smile. Madam will please to be served, he suggested, with a bow. I am waiting for my friend Lady Carey, Lucille answered. I understood that she had come down. Perhaps you will send and see if she is in the reading room. With much pleasure, madam, the man answered. In a few minutes he returned. Madam's friend was the Lady Carey? He asked. Lucille nodded. The man was gently troubled. But, Milady Carey, he said, has left more than an hour ago. Lucille looked up, astonished. Left the hotel, she exclaimed. But yes, madam, he exclaimed. Milady Carey left to catch the boat train at Calais for England. It is impossible, Lucille answered. We only arrived at midday. I will inquire again, the man declared. But it was in the office that they told me so. They told you quite correctly, said a familiar voice. I have come to take her place. Countess, I trust that in me you will recognize an efficient substitute. It was the Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer who was calmly seating himself opposite to her. The waiter, with the discretion of his class, withdrew for a few paces and stood awaiting orders. Lucille looked across at him in amazement. You here, she exclaimed, and Muriel gone. What does this mean? The prince leaned forward. It means, he said, that after you left I was in torment. I felt that you had no one with you who could be of assistance supposing the worst happened. Muriel is all very well, but she is a woman, and she has no diplomacy, no resource. I felt, Lucille, that I should not be happy unless I myself saw you into safety. So you followed us here, Lucille remarked quietly. Exactly. You do not blame me. It was for your sake, as well as my own. And Muriel, why has she left me without farewell, without warning of any sort? The prince smiled and stroked his fair moustache. Well, he said, it is rather an awkward thing for me to explain, but to tell you the truth, Muriel was a little, more than a little, annoyed at my coming. She has no right to be, but, well, you know, she is what you call a monopolist. She and I have been friends for many years. I understand perfectly what you have wished to convey, Lucille said. But what I do not understand are the exact reasons which brought you here. The prince took up the carte du jour. As we dine, he said, I will tell you. You will permit me to order. Lucille rose to her feet. For yourself, certainly, she answered. As for me, I have accepted no invitation to dine with you, nor do I propose to do so. The prince frowned. Be reasonable, Lucille, he pleaded. I must talk with you. There are important plans to be made. I have a great deal to say to you. Sit down. Lucille looked across at him with a curious smile upon her lips. You have a good deal to say to me, she remarked. Yes, I will believe that. But of the truth how much, I wonder. By and by, he said, you will judge me differently. For hors d'oeuvre what do you say to oeufs de pluvier? Then. Pardon me, she interrupted, I am not interested in your dinner. In our dinner, he ventured gently. I am not dining with you, she declared firmly. If you insist upon remaining here I shall have something served in my room. You know quite well that we are certain to be recognized. One would imagine that this was a deliberate attempt on your part to compromise me. Lucille, he said, do not be foolish. Why do you persist in treating me as though I were your persecutor? Because you are, she said coolly. It is ridiculous, he declared. You are in the most serious danger, and I have come only to save you. I can do it, and I will. But listen, not unless you change your demeanor towards me. She laughed scornfully. She had risen to her feet now, and he was perforce compelled to follow her example. Is that a challenge? She asked. You may take it as such if you will, he answered, with a note of sullenness in his tone. You know very well that I have but to lift my finger and the gendarmes will be here. Yes, we will call it a challenge. All my life I have wanted you. Now I think that my time has come. Even Suspenia has deserted you. You are alone, and let me tell you that danger is closer at your heels than you know of. I can save you, and I will. But I have a price, and it must be paid. If I refuse, she asked. I send for the chief of the police. She looked him up and down, a measured, merciless survey. He was a tall, big man, but he seemed to shrink into insignificance. You are a coward and a bully, she said slowly. You know quite well that I am innocent of any knowledge even concerning Duson's death. But I would sooner meet my fate, whatever it might be, than suffer even the touch of your fingers upon my hand. Your presence is hateful to me. Send for your chief of the police. String your lies together as you will. I am satisfied. She left him and swept from the room, a spot of color burning in her cheeks, her eyes lit with fire. The pride of her race had asserted itself. She felt no longer any fear. She only desired to sever herself at once and completely from all association with this man. In the hall she sent for her maid. Fetch my cloak and jewel case, Celeste, she ordered. I am going across to the Bristol. You can return for the other luggage. But, madam, do as I say at once, Lucille ordered. The girl hesitated and then obeyed. Lucille found herself suddenly addressed in a quiet tone by a man who had been sitting in an easy chair, half hidden by a palm tree. Will you favor me, madam, with a moment's conversation? Lucille turned round. She recognized at once the man with whom she had conversed upon the steamer. In the quietest form of evening dress, there was something noticeable in the man's very insignificance. He seemed a little out of his element. Lucille had a sudden inspiration. The man was a detective. What do you wish to say? She asked, half doubtfully. I overheard, he remarked, your order to your maid. She had something to say to you, but you gave her no opportunity. And you? She asked, what do you wish to say? I wish to advise you, he said, not to leave the hotel. She looked at him doubtfully. You cannot understand, she said, why I wish to leave it. I have no alternative. Nevertheless, he said, I hope that you will change your mind. Are you a detective? She asked abruptly. Madam is correct. The flush of color faded from her cheeks. I presume, then, she said, that I am under your surveillance. In a sense, he admitted, it is true. On the steamer, she remarked, you spoke as though your interest in me was not inimical. Nor is it, he answered promptly. You are in a difficult position, but you may find things not so bad as you imagine. At present my advice to you is this, go upstairs to your room and stay there. The little man had a compelling manner. Lucille made her way towards the elevator. As a matter of fact, she murmured bitterly, I am not, I suppose, permitted to leave the hotel. Madam puts the matter bluntly, he answered, but certainly if you should insist upon leaving, it would be my duty to follow you. She turned away from him and entered the elevator. The door of her room was slightly ajar, and she saw that a waiter was busy at a small round table. She looked at him in surprise. He was arranging places for two. Who gave you your orders? She asked. But it was monsieur, the man answered, with a low bow. Dinner for two. Monsieur, she repeated. What monsieur? I am the culprit, a familiar voice answered from the depths of an easy chair, whose back was to her. I was very hungry, and it occurred to me that under the circumstances you would probably not have dined either. I hope that you will like what I have ordered. The plover's eggs look delicious. She gave a little cry of joy. It was Mr. Sabin. Chapter 42. The prince dined carefully, but with less than his usual appetite. Afterwards he lit a cigarette and strolled for a moment into the lounge. Celeste, who was waiting for him, glided at once to his side. Monsieur, she whispered, I have been here for 1 hour. He nodded. Well, Monsieur le Duc has arrived. The prince turned sharply round. Who?
Monsieur le Duc de Suspenier.
He calls himself no longer Mr. Sabin. A dull flush of angry color rose almost to his temples. Why did you not tell me before? He exclaimed. Monsieur was in the restaurant, she answered. It was impossible for me to do anything but wait. Where is he? Alas, he is with madame, the girl answered. The prince was very profane. He started at once for the elevator. In a moment or two he presented himself at Lucille's sitting room. They were still lingering over their dinner. Mr. Sabin welcomed him with grave courtesy. The prince is in time to take his liqueur with us, he remarked, rising. Will you take fin champagne, prince, or chartreuse? I recommend the Finn champagne. The prince bowed his thanks. He was white to the lips with the effort for self-mastery. I congratulate you, Mr. Sabin, he said, upon your opportune arrival. You will be able to help Lucille through the annoyance to which I deeply regret that she should be subjected. Mr. Sabin gently raised his eyebrows. Annoyance, he repeated. I fear that I do not quite understand. The prince smiled. Surely Lucille has told you, he said, of the perilous position in which she finds herself. My wife, Mr. Sabin said, has told me nothing. You alarm me. The prince shrugged his shoulders. I deeply regret to tell you, he said, that the law has proved too powerful for me. I can no longer stand between her and what I fear may prove a most unpleasant episode. Lucille will be arrested within the hour. Upon what charge? Mr. Sabin asked. The murder of Dusan. Mr. Sabin laughed very softly, very gently, but with obvious genuineness. You are joking, Prince, he exclaimed. I regret to say, the prince answered, that you will find it very far from a joking matter. Mr. Sabin was suddenly stern. Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer, he said, you are a coward and a bully. The prince started forward with clenched fist. Mr. Sabin had no weapon, but he did not flinch. You can frighten women, he said, with a bogey such as this, but you have no longer a woman to deal with. You and I know that such a charge is absurd, but you little know the danger to which you expose yourself by trifling with this subject. Dusan left a letter addressed to me in which he announced his reasons for committing suicide. Suicide. Yes. He preferred suicide to murder, even at the bidding of the Prince of Saxe-Leinitzer. He wrote and explained these things to me, and the letter is in safe hands. The arrest of Lucille, my dear prince, would mean the ruin of your amiable society. This letter, the prince said slowly, why was it not produced at the inquest? Where is it now? It is deposited in a sealed packet with the Earl of Derringham, Mr. Sabin answered. As to producing it at the inquest, I thought it more discreet not to. I leave you to judge of my reasons. But I can assure you that your fears for my wife's safety have been wholly misplaced. There is not the slightest reason for her to hurry off to America. We may take a little trip there presently, but not just yet. The prince made a mistake. He lost his temper. You, he cried, you can go to America when you like, and stay there. Europe has had enough of you with your hair-brained schemes and foolish failures. But Lucille does not leave this country. We have need of her. I forbid her to leave. Do you hear? In the name of the order I command her to remain here. Mr. Sabin was quite calm, but his face was full of terrible things. Prince, he said, if I by any chance numbered myself amongst your friends I would warn you that you yourself are a traitor to your order. You prostitute a great cause when you stoop to use its machinery to assist your own private vengeance. I ask you for your own sake to consider your words. Lucille is mine, mine she will remain, even though you should descend to something more despicable, more cowardly than ordinary treason, to wrest her from me. You reproached me with the failures of my life. Great they may have been, but if you attempt this you will find that I am not yet an impotent person. The prince was white with rage. The sight of Lucille standing by Mr. Sabin's side, her hand lightly resting upon his, her dark eyes full of inscrutable tenderness, maddened him. He was flouted and ignored. He was carried away by a storm of passion. He tore a sheet of paper from his pocketbook, and unlocking a small gold case at the end of his watch chain, shook from it a pencil with yellow crayon. Mr. Sabin leaned over towards him. You sign it at your peril, Prince, he said. It will mean worse things than that for you. For a second he hesitated. Lucille also leaned towards him. Prince, she said, have I not kept my vows faithfully? Think. I came from America at a moment's notice. I left my husband without even a word of farewell. I entered upon a hateful